In their comfortable suburban home, Annie and Reese seemed like the perfect newlyweds, always laughing and dreaming together. But one cold March morning, Reese started forgetting words, and his warm smile turned into a distant look that didn't seem to recognize Annie. When she noticed a lock on his office door and a strange, bad smell coming from inside, Annie couldn't help but ask herself, what was really happening behind that closed door? This is a true story of Annie from the quiet suburb of Brookfield. What started as a happy marriage soon began to fall apart, uncovering dark secrets. What really went on in their seemingly perfect home? Here are Annie's own words. All of this started about 5 months after I married my husband. We were together for 4 years before we got married. Everything was great. There were minimal fights and tons of respect and great communication from the beginning. I loved my husband. He was a kind soul who always tended to me when I was sick, surprised me with cute dates, made me laugh, and loved my friends and family. The moment I introduced him to them, he was greeted with open arms, and he has been there for them all ever since. He's driven my siblings to their sports games, taken my mom out for coffee, and even went hunting with my dad. He always had this way of lighting up the room when he walked into it, and making even the darkest days seem like nothing. He was my person. He was everything. Just before we got married, he bought me this adorable shepherd cross which we named Potato, but for short, who went everywhere with us. Camping, vacations, beach days. He was our only child, and he was very attached to my husband, Reese, who was approximately a year old. And because he was a rescue, we never really knew what his previous life before us was like. But we loved him all the same. We enjoyed going to the gym together, going on walks, and cooking together. Some may say it was like the love you see in movies. Picture perfect. And it was truly, our wedding was beautiful, like nothing I could have imagined. We spent time with our best friends and family, shared memories, and I took his last name. It was the perfect day with my soulmate. Reese was a businessman and worked for a large company a few cities over, and I was a small business owner. Both of us were fortunate enough that we got to spend most of our time at home with each other, and he has a lovely office upstairs where he could tend to any work-related stuff. I preferred to work from the kitchen table, as I felt too confined in an office. Everything was great for the first 5 months of our marriage, but things slowly started to change. Weird things started to happen around March. I started to notice Reese seemed distant, not himself. He often complained of brain fog, like he just couldn't think straight. Then that brain fog turned into migraines. He would become ill frequently and had a hard time keeping up with his work. Eventually, he was getting ill so often that his job laid him off. He couldn't keep up with the workload, and the company couldn't afford to employ someone who wasn't working enough hours. This took a huge toll on his health. He began sleeping a lot, even during the day. 1 nap a day turned into 2. He wouldn't eat much. I knew he was slipping into a horrible place. So one day I finally convinced him to see a doctor. The doctor said he couldn't explain the migraines, that it was most likely something to do with a past injury or his diet. He was prescribed some antidepressants and told to start eating more sustaining meals. Well, I didn't completely agree with the doctor because we always ate healthy and exercised frequently, and Reese had no memory of a neck or back injury. I didn't know what else to do, so I just hoped the medication would help. One night, I was laying in bed watching my show, which I usually did before we went to sleep. Reese had posted himself in his office, claiming he was in search of another job. I was hopeful for him, and I began to see a small change in his attitude. While he still suffered from the migraines and brain fog, it seemed that his overall mood had improved. He was eating more and coming back to the gym with me when he could. I heard him close the office door and start down the hall to our bedroom. I paused my show, hoping to chat with him about his day and his findings. He opened the door, and I could see the exhaustion written all over his solemn face. I asked him how he was and about his findings, to which he only replied fine, then slammed our bathroom door. The sound of the shower turning on followed suite. I was utterly shocked. Even in his lowest times, he had never slammed the door in my face or been short with me like that. He always communicated his feelings. I shook off the miserable feeling and started watching my show again. When he emerged from the shower an hour later, his demeanor was the same. I decided not to push and turned my light off to go to sleep. A few days later, and I still hadn't heard an apology for his actions. So I decided to talk to him. I found him in his office, but when I tried the knob, I found it locked. So I knocked twice. The door opened a tad, just enough that I could see his bloodshot eye through the crack. "What's up?" he asked. "I would like to speak to you. About the other night, please." My voice was stern but low. Instead of opening up the door to let me in, he quickly squeezed himself out, shutting the door behind him again. He crossed his arms, face painted with annoyance. "You have been very irritable these last couple days, and I feel that it is being turned on me without reason." He huffed out a small laugh. "You really think I need this shit right now, Annie? I lost my job, I can't find anything, and my fucking head is pounding. I can't think straight, and I can hardly eat without throwing up. Just leave me alone." With that, he stormed back into his dark office and slammed the door in my face. I couldn't help but notice the smell that wafted off of him and out of that room. It smelled like rot. Days and days passed, and I hardly saw Reese. He kept himself locked up in that office all day and night. He never even came to bed anymore. Part of me wanted to go in there and haul his sorry ass out, but another part of me was terrified of the smell that rolled off him that day, of the crazy look in his eyes, of the way his teeth seemed like they were decaying, his gums bloody and red. He left one day. I didn't know why, and I didn't really care. All I knew was I needed to get into that office. I had to see why he was keeping himself cooped up in there, as well as what was causing the awful smell. So I started up the stairs on shaky legs. My heart pounded in my chest. The door, of course, was locked, but I didn't care. I threw my shoulder into it a few times before the frame finally cracked and the door swung open. I silently thanked the jail, but my thoughts were soon a distant memory at the scene that lay before me. Piles of vomit seeped into the carpet next to his desk. Chunks of hair laid all over the desk, and a pile of decaying, maggot-filled teeth lay in the trash can. His office chair had flaps of torn skin fused in with it. Blood speckled the carpet in a few places. I covered my mouth to stop the stench from invading, but it was too late. I booked it to the bathroom and emptied the contents of my stomach into the toilet. I literally had no clue what was going on. I was panicking, I was crying. I dialed his brother and hurried him over to our house. After I explained everything to him, I took him upstairs to see the office. He had to step out a few times to keep himself from adding to the vomit already on the floor from Reese. I'm sure the horror and disgust in our faces was almost comical. I asked him what I should do. He was speechless. We decided we were going to get him to the doctor. Something wasn't right with him. So when his car pulled in the driveway, we readied ourselves to face him. But he came inside, closed the door, walked upstairs, and locked himself back in the office. Like we didn't even exist. He loved his brother. They were like best friends. So him ignoring both of us like that was insane. Listen, Annie, I think you need to give him some time, call a therapist, and see if anyone can do a home visit, describe the situation, and see what they suggest. I don't think cornering him is a good idea, and I am most definitely not going back in that room again. I nodded my understanding, not really able to form words. Obviously his brother, Chris, hadn't caught a glimpse like I did, hadn't seen the strips of meat hanging from Reese's face, or the maggot that writhed on the floor where it fell from him, looking for its next meal. A week had passed, and I hadn't seen Reese at all, but the smell coming from his office was beyond grotesque. I had to keep the windows open at all times. Otherwise, I would be clutching my stomach over the toilet. I had talked to a therapist, as Chris suggested, and they basically told me that I was crazy and needed help. They even suggested hallucinations. It was on the 8th night that the gurgling sound started coming from his office, and they didn't stop. They would get loud and then quiet, like he was choking on his own bodily fluids. I made the mistake and peered under the door one night. My heart almost gave in as I saw his raw, bony feet stumbling around on the carpet. Long, decaying strands of meat trailed behind him, like his skin had been flayed from the bone. Maggots dropped every so often, his voice garbled and raw. In the far corner, I could make out one of his eyeballs laying on the floor, flies swarming it. It's been 5 days since I saw that scene under the door. The garbling from down the hall has been going on for days now, his voice less and less distinguishable. It sounds like someone drowning in mud, the thick sludge coating their throat before slowly snuffing them out. Puss scratching at the office door, his whines cutting through the strangled sounds. I am shaking as I type this out. My head feels like I have been hit by a truck, and I swear I can feel something crawling around behind my eyes. Wakey, wakey. My eyes flutter open to the sound of my dad doing his morning ritual. It's usually bearable, but not today. My head is killing me, and I have no idea why. My dad throws an apple in my bed and exclaims, "Wake up, wake up, every morning, every day. Wake up, every morning, every day." I really hate that song, but he does this every morning. He grabs me by the wrist and lifts me up yelling, "I like to eat apples and bananas." Oh boy, here we go. I'm up, I mumble. The words come out muffled behind his loud singing. I reach for the apple that he threw at my bed, but he quickly swipes it and takes a huge bite, then hands it to me. "Hurry up or you'll be late. And don't forget that today is picture day," he bellows, as he walks out of my room. Ugh, it's picture day. I really hate picture day. I quickly scarf down the rest of the apple, which wasn't difficult considering my dad's tendency to eat apples in 2 bites. As I walk into the bathroom to wash up and get ready for school, I feel a sharp pain shoot through my spine into my head. The next thing I know, I'm waking up on the toilet bewildered, my head throbbing worse than before. What just happened? I get up, still dazed and confused, when something catches a corner of my eye. My bedroom clock. OHNO, it's already 8 a.m. I'm gonna miss the bus. I quickly throw something on and rush to the living room. Why didn't my dad wake me? Come to think of it, my mom would have called me for breakfast 20 minutes ago. What's going on? And why does my head hurt so much? My thought pattern is interrupted by a horrifying, blood-curdling shriek. It sounds like it's coming from the kitchen. What could have possibly caused that unnatural sound? I run downstairs and am immediately overwhelmed by a nauseating, stomach-churning stench. The whole living room is in ruins. My mom's fine china, crystals and glass are all shattered, with broken glass scattered everywhere. The odor makes me retch with disgust. It seems to be coming from the kitchen, where I heard that horrible shriek. I stumble my way to the kitchen, careful not to step on any shards of broken glass. I take a deep breath and prepare myself for the worst, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw next. I think I know what was causing that foul stench. Blood. Blood everywhere. Pools of blood running down the kitchen sink. I see an outstretched hand coming from the sink, as if reaching for help, but it's clearly way too late for help now. The arm is connected to a torso, and the remnants of what looks like a face, a woman's face, but it's unrecognizable. A bright blue pendant hanging from the woman's neck. I recognize that necklace. It's my mom's. What's going on? Is this some kind of nightmare? I must still be asleep. This can't be real. Something is on top of my mom, mauling at her face and torso, ripping up pieces of flesh and shoveling it into what looks like its mouth. It suddenly stops feasting and sniffs the air around for a moment, then turns around, a pair of pitch black eyes, all pupils, fixate on me, as if staring right through me. The demon stands there, staring into my eyes intently. Its mouth is open, revealing rows of jagged, blood-stained teeth. Its dark red lips curled up into what seems to be some kind of malicious grin. Its bright red skin is covered in scars and sticks. An ungodly, horrifying sight that would give Frankenstein's monster a run for his money. The sinister smile gets wider, blood running down from it. The demon lets out another loud and despicable shriek and reaches out to grab me. Its long, sharp talons inches away from my face. I feel an icy cold breeze shudder through my spine. My every instinct is telling me to run, but my feet stay firmly planted on the floor as if they were bolted to it. I try to scream, but all I manage is a little squeak. I am quite literally paralyzed with fear. This is it. This is how I die. I think to myself, Mom and Dad are gone and I'm next. The demon looks me dead in the eyes, opens its mouth, its dry, cracked lips covered in blood, convulsed to form that same twisted smile. I prepare myself for another terrible screech, but instead I hear a familiar sound. Wakey wakey. My eyes open to the sight of my dad doing his morning ritual. I have never been so happy to hear him singing that stupid song. I jump out of bed and give him a huge hug, much to his surprise, and let out a sigh of relief. That was all just a nightmare. My family is okay. The previous homeowner's journals. Hello everyone. I recently purchased a new home. It's newly renovated and in a prime location. However, the previous homeowners left the house a mess. Apparently, they were in a rush and left a lot of their crap behind. While tossing out their stuff, some notebooks, scraps of paper, and other junk fell out of a box, and you can say curiosity got the best of me. I decided to read through some of it. The first couple of notepads were filled with notes and electrical stuff. I guess the previous owner was an electrician or something. However, right before I was ready to call it quits and toss it all out, I came across a notebook with a short story in it. I noticed that throughout all the notebooks and pads, there were random jots and blurbs. Some of the writing is rushed and hard to read. But as I pieced this story together, I decided I'd share it here. It's all a mess though. A lot of writing was probably done in the spur of the moment. Sadly, we never got to meet the sellers at closing, so we won't be able to give this back. They apparently had already left the state before we closed. Anyway, I'll be releasing the story as I compile it. Let me know what you think, and if you think you know the authors, please let me know. I'd love to return their work. Anyway, here it is, Chapter 1. The dream, my cheeks twitched slightly as the black haze of sleep started to lift. A soft groan left my throat as I stretched my neck to a more comfortable position. I heard my wife moving as well, the comfortable shuffling sound that bed sheets make. She just couldn't seem to get comfortable though, as the grogginess cleared up and sleep was leaving me entirely. "Are you okay?" I mumbled, putting my arm around her, annoyed that my sleep was ruined. My waking ears kept twitching as they focused in on the sound. It was a soft shuffling sound. Swish, pull, step, swish, pull, step. Maybe my wife Celine was going to the bathroom, I thought, as I gently tightened my arms around her warm, tender frame. My eyes jutted open and my body tensed. I felt my skin crawl as my brain shocked itself awake. My mind began spinning with realization. Even if she was shuffling to the bathroom, our master bathroom is right here, right in front of the bed. That isn't much of a walk, and she's lying right next to me, in my arms, gently snoring, not moving a single inch. My ears zoned in. Was this a mouse? An animal? No, no, this wasn't a mouse. It wasn't any kind of small animal. I don't have to be an audio expert with perfect hearing to know that this noise is not animalistic at all. After a few seconds, I realized we were being burglarized. Someone was in my home right now at this very moment. My home is a ranch. Everything is one floor. Celine and I are first-time homeowners and have been living here in perfect suburbia for 5 months. A stark contrast to our chaotic environment in the city. The house is practically open concept, with a hallway from the living room leading straight to our master bedroom. Admittedly, Most sounds breaking the silence tend to scare us in our newfound environment. Our refrigerator loves popping out random ice cubes like mini gunshots, and Celine's been having it the hardest with random noises. This wouldn't be the first time something crazy has happened to us. And now I heard what sounded like shuffling in the living room. The creak and groan of our wood floors matched with the constant slow footsteps. It sounded like someone was searching around for something in short distances, an item that kept eluding them. I heard the pillows on the couch bump around and the coffee table move as my ears continued to zone in. My heart started to pound heavily, and I felt a tightness around my chest. Slowly and as quietly as possible, I leaned over to my nightstand and opened it to grab my handgun. As panic continued to swell in my chest, my wife started shifting and waking up, whether due to me or the intruder I don't know, and I quickly shushed her with my hand over her mouth. She's feisty and immediately gave me an angry look, probably more upset to be jarred awake. Celine tends to jump to conclusions without thinking, a headstrong woman with a strong personality. But she's also an amazing partner and knows exactly what to do when I'm serious. She motions to speak, but stays quiet once she notices the gun in my hand. There's someone in our living room, or at least I think. I whisper as lowly as I can, slowly and quietly heading over to unlock the bedroom door. I carefully open the door, leaving it slightly ajar to avoid making noise, and made my way down the hallway. My wife was sitting on the bed with her phone in hand, probably calling the police. In hindsight, I should have stayed in the bedroom and let the police handle the situation. However, I can be quite a brave idiot. My heart was pounding hard as a warm sensation of blood rushed to my face. Growing up in the city, I found myself in many dangerous situations, but I never could have realized how much more terrifying it was to have an intruder in your home in the early morning. As I crept closer, I saw the hunchback of a figure wearing a black tank top and baggy black shorts. My coffee table blocked the view from his calves down. The figure had pale white skin, seemingly Caucasian, maybe even albino, and its bent over frame had its hands in the crevices of my couch. It wore either a tight black beanie or maybe it had a thick buzz cut. The distance was too far to be certain. I wondered what it expected to find in my couch. Certainly it wasn't looking for dust bunnies or loose change. Slowly walking closer, I aimed my firearm at the intruder. The floor creaked under me. He stood up quickly, startled, his head whipping in my direction to look directly at me as the rest of him slowly turned around. As he turned, everything about him seemed to shift, almost shimmering in the light streaming through the bay window blinds, as if he was made out of fine silver-colored sand. His pale skin tone shimmered to a tan tone, and a tattoo morphed on his chest and arms, mimicking the same tattoos on my upper body. I froze, staring at my doppelganger. His body was no longer albino in a black outfit, but instead was shirtless, wearing sweatpants with my messy bed head and hairline, and holding something. I faced myself. I was holding a firearm, and he was holding what I perceived to be a firearm, but something about it looked off. I took a step. I took a step. I walked toward him. He did the same. I stopped a short distance away, and he mimicked me. My chest pounded as my reflection's face grew slightly red. I can only imagine that was how I looked. My breathing was calm yet heavy. So was his, but without the sound of breaths being taken. I took a step backward, aimed at him, and he mimicked each movement until he backed into the coffee table and fell. I took this opportunity and fired off 6 bullets into him, 5 making their mark. I almost feared I might feel the pain myself. My wife ran down the hall to see the scene unfolding. "Please tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing," I pleaded. My wife confirmed my sanity. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. What the hell is that? What the hell is this? What is going on? Calm down." My mirror image screamed and I fired 2 more rounds into him. The silence stood heavy in the air. "That was not your voice," my wife stated as we watched blood pour out of him. more like sand flowing out of a vial than liquid. My body lurched forward as my name, Cashin, screamed out. My neck was punctured by 2 rows of teeth, and my doppelganger was standing back up. Fear immediately struck my heart as I went to grab the being behind me, and beep, beep, beep. My morning alarm was going off. My heart was pounding, my body soaked in sweat. My wife groaned. "Turn off the alarm, Cashin." I turned off the alarm and stood up, the pounding in my chest dissipating as I realized that all I went through was a vivid dream. I checked the magazine to my firearm and counted 15 bullets. All was well, just a horrible dream. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, and wrote every detail I remembered down as my wife woke up. I began telling Celine about the dream as I jotted it down in my brown notepad. Reliving it through speech actually helped with jotting everything down. That's got to mean something. Maybe we should play the lottery? Celine joked as she went to shower. Ah, Celine. She believes in astrology, mythical things, and that rocks and essential oils can influence a person or put them to sleep, but she won't believe me. We got prepared for work. I normally work remotely, but today I was heading down to Philadelphia for a survey. As I put my coat on and made my way toward the kitchen to make my morning coffee before heading to my car, I decided to take a moment and stare into the living room. Everything looked utterly normal. Nothing changed. No evidence of an attack. Nothing. Until something shiny caught my eye. And that, my friends, is what he has written down on the first page of this notebook. The next pages seem to be notes jotted down for an office in 16th and Market Street. No idea where that's at though. If you'd like to hear more of this story, let me know. I think it's kind of creepy because I can personally visualize it a bit since, I live here and obviously this house was his inspiration. Edit. Hey! I decided to peek around the living room and I notice a hole in the floor. It looks to be patched by some with putty and revarnished. Refinished? I don't know. Maybe I'm being paranoid, but could bullet holes be that easy to fix? I never owned a gun before. I only know about them from movies. Maybe it's actually just a knot in the wood, and I'm being paranoid. I think I'll be reading a bit more of these journals in case this is something else. I don't know. Let me know what you think. I'll put a picture in the comments or something when I get a chance. The House of Lies by Crazed Frogwood floor creaks as the Garway children run to the halls, laughing and jumping. Mr. Garway hugs his wife and smiles to himself thinking of how all of his hard work paid off. After countless hours of wasting away writing book after book, trying to make it big, he finally did it. His book made a list posted by the New York Times titled Top 25 Most Underrated Books of 2015. Finally offering him enough money to buy a beautiful house tucked back in the woods of Massachusetts to encourage his writing and to offer his kids the life he couldn't have growing up in New York City. As they unpack the final boxes, the feeling sets in with everyone. Mrs. Garway feels relieved that they're done. Mr. Garway feels satisfied that his work has passed away, and the 2 Garway children are excited that they have endless woods to explore as they age. All of them were ignorant to the whispers that traveled from mouth to ear and ear to mouth of the citizens of Richardson, Massachusetts. The Garways were faithful people, good people who gave back to their community. The true, modern-day nuclear family. Mrs. Garway quickly found a new job working as a traveling real estate agent, picking up right where she left off in Boston. Every couple of weeks, Mrs. Garway would pack her bags, kiss the kids on their forehead, and say goodbye to the small town of Richardson to sell a house far beyond the state lines. But while she was away, Mrs. Garway's faithfulness disappeared. Each city she stayed in, night after night, she brought a new man back to the hotel room, trying to fill the sex life she didn't have at home due to Mr. Garway's obsession with writing. After the house was sold, she would go back home and kiss her husband on the mouth with the same lips that were on another man's just the night before. After months of this cycle, Mr. Garway began to question why after 8 p.m. her phone would go dark, and why her clothes smelled like cologne when she got back home. Mrs. Garway would shrug it off and say something along the lines of, "Oh, well, it must have just been one of the clients at the open house," or "There must have been a man that stayed in my room before I was there." Her lies echoed through the halls and soaked into the walls, hopefully to be forgotten. But lies aren't forgotten at the house tucked away in the woods of Richardson, Massachusetts. After every one of Mrs. Garway's trips, Mr. Garway's unease built. The scent of cologne clinging onto her clothes would hit him like a train. The unspoken conviction of her actions picked away at his mind more and more. The atmosphere of the home felt like moving through concrete for him. He knew the truth, but could not confront it. That was until her most recent trip, when the smell of cologne was paired with her near constant smiling at her phone. That night, while he helped the children with their multiplication homework, he overheard Mrs. Garway on the phone, her voice low and secretive. "I can't keep doing this," she said, with a nervous chuckle. The sound tightened his chest with pain and sadness. That night, as they were crawling into bed, Mr. Garway stopped and looked deep into her eyes. "I know what you're up to," he said. "I am done playing this game of naivety. I could smell him on you the second you walked in the door." Mrs. Garway's face tightened, her mask slipping. "You're ridiculous. Stop imagining things," she shot back, but her words sounded hollow, lacking conviction. "Bullshit. I can't keep pretending like you're the same women I married," he said with the weight of all of her lies he has been shouldering. Silence hung between them, thick with tension. The walls seemed to shrink in around them, as if they were reacting to the tension. Mr. Garway, between his angry thoughts, could have sworn to feel the floorboards shift underneath him. Mrs. Garway tried to respond, but her voice faltered. She quickly turned her head to hide the swelling tears in her eyes. "Stop it. You're being ridiculous," she finally said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Mr. Garway took a step towards her, his face hot with anger and his heart pounding from adrenaline. "No! What's ridiculous is that you think I'm supposed to believe that the smell of a new cologne lingers on you whenever you get home from work trips." The lights flickered as they faced each other. "I am working hard for this family," she snapped back. "I don't have the time for your paranoia. Working hard. Is that what you call sleeping with other men constantly?" He snapped. "You just think that you know everything, don't you, Sherlock?" She snarled back. "Just tell me the fucking truth," he yelled. The air in the room became hot and thick, as if it was reacting to their heated accusations. "You want the truth? Fine. Maybe if you weren't so tied up trying to chase the high of your one-hit wonder book, I'd feel more attracted to you," she shouted. "But no, you just have to be the next Stephen fucking King. So you're admitting it? Just like that? All that we've built, gone just like that," he replied, his voice shaking. "No, I just want you to pay attention to me," she replied, her voice softening. He watched as she buried her face in her hands. Guilt flooded over him, because he knew she was right. He had been burying himself in his work, and has sacrificed personal relationships because of it. But this guilt did not last. Anger building up, he shouted, "I am trying to provide our children the best lives they can have." But before she could respond, a scream echoed from the kitchen. Instantly recognizing that scream as their daughter's, they immediately made a break for the kitchen. Mr. Garway burst through the door first, his heart racing. The room was dim, shadows clinging to the corners, and his eyes quickly scanned for their daughter. He found her crouched on the floor, trembling, staring wide-eyed at the space under the table. "What's wrong? What happened?" he yelled, the panic in his voice unmistakable. Their daughter pointed a shaking finger toward the wall, where a deep, dark stain had begun to spread, oozing from the cracks. "The wall, it's talking," she whimpered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mrs. Garway rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. "Sweetheart, it's okay," she said, her voice trembling. "What do you mean it's talking?" "It said my name," their daughter cried, her small body shaking. "It said it knows all our secrets. A cold chill swept through the room, and Mr. Garway felt the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. He looked at the wall, the dark stain pulsing ominously, almost as if it were breathing. "Stay there, sweetie. Daddy's gonna check it out," he replied, voice shaking. He stepped closer to the wall, heart pounding in his chest. As he reached out, the air thickened, a heavy weight pressing down on him. The stain twisted and turned, forming shapes that seemed to mock him. Whispers echoed in his ears, hundreds of voices filling his mind with deceit. "Stop it! Get out of my head!" he shouted, stumbling back, bumping into the kitchen table. "Daddy!" his daughter cried as he spun around to look at them. His wife and daughter watched with horrified expressions. "Mom? Dad? What's happening down there?" their son's voice cried from upstairs. Panic surged through Mr. Garway. "We have to get him," he shouted as he pulled his wife and daughter up and towards the stairs. The house shook around them, the walls seeming to rot away. As they dashed towards the stairs, the walls began to sink, bringing the ceiling slowly down. "Get out now," he yelled to his daughter, pushing her towards the front door. "Daddy, I'm scared," she sobbed. "I'll be okay, sweetie. Get outside and wait for us there," he urged, forcing her towards the door. His daughter hesitated, glancing back at him. "But what about you, Daddy?" "Just go," he shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. The floor shifted beneath his feet. "I promise I'll be right behind you." With a final, reluctant nod, she darted out into the night, the cool air washing over her. He turned back to his wife. "We need to move," he said, pulling her along as they climbed the stairs, the will to save their son fueling their steps. Darting through the crumbling hallway, they finally reached their son's room. The door handle was hot to the touch, but that didn't stop Mr. Garway. With a swift kick to the door, the resistance gave. "Buddy, we need to get out of here right now," he shouted as he ran into the room, lifting him into his arms. He turned to go for the door, but the ceiling had already taken over the hallways. "We need to jump out the window," shouted Mrs. Garway, her voice filled with panic as she pointed towards their only escape. "I don't want to die," cried their son. "Don't worry, buddy, you won't. Not today," Mr. Garway shouted as he ran for the window. The air was thick with desperation, pressing down on them. As the house vibrated ominously, its walls pulsing like a heartbeat. "Help me open it," Mr. Garway called to his wife, the urgency in his voice cutting through the panic. Together, they strained against the window. The frame warped and fought back against their might. "Come on," Mrs. Garway yelled, her hands trembling, slick with sweat as she pushed against the window. "Just a little more." "I can feel it," he replied, gritting his teeth as he put all his strength into it, desperate for their escape. "It's almost there." With one last heave, the window finally gave way, swinging open to reveal the dark night outside. Fresh air rushed in, but it was tainted with the scent of sweet decay from the house. Mr. Garway quickly set his son down, kneeling to meet his tear-filled eyes. "Listen to me, buddy," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "You can do this. Climb out and grab onto that tree." He pointed to the sturdy branches that hung just outside, his only option. "But what about you?" their son pleaded, his small voice shaking as tears streamed down his cheeks. "I'll be right behind you," Mr. Garway promised, though his heart twisted with uncertainty. "You just need to trust me. I'll always come for you." The boy hesitated, his small hands trembling on the windowsill. "I don't want to leave you, Dad," he whispered. "I know," Mr. Garway said, his own throat tightening as he fought to hold back tears. "But we need to be brave. If we stick together, we'll get out of this, I swear." He ruffled his son's hair gently, trying to instill a sense of courage. With a shaky breath, their son nodded. "Okay, Dad, I'll go," he said, and with that he climbed up, finding his footing on the windowsill. "Good boy," Mr. Garway said. "Now, climb down and get to your sister. I'll be right behind you." Mr. Garway turned, making eye contact with his wife. A look of understanding passed between them. Mr. and Mrs. Garway knew that they would not be able to make it out in time. So in their final moments they embraced. "I love you, baby," said Mr. Garway. "I love you, honey," Mrs. Garway responded as the house enveloped them, forever keeping them trapped within the walls of their beautiful house tucked away in the woods of Richardson, Massachusetts. So I used to work at an old antique shop in Michigan. It was run by an old lady named Joanna, 74F, and her daughter Sarah, 44F. To give context, Joanna was born in 1950, and in 1975 was when she moved out of her parents' house and into an apartment complex in Traverse City. She lived in that apartment complex for 5 years until the apartment building lost funding, and so everyone had to leave, and the building was demolished around that time Joanna met her husband Dave, 26M. They ended up getting married, and Joanna decided that she wanted to make her own business. Dave supported that, and she said she knew where to start. She went to the old lot where the apartment complex was, and she bought the lot and ended up making an antique shop that was also her house. Ended up living in that antique shop for 30 years, and then they had Sarah. 10 years later, Dave, 36, said to Joanna, 34, that he was going to the bank to take some money out to go pay for the expenses on the building. About 2 hours later, Joanna got a call from the police saying that Dave was killed in a car accident. She was devastated to get the news. She didn't know how to handle it. She thought that she was going to have to shut the business down. But years went by, and when Sarah turned 16, she ended up helping Joanna with the business. Joanna is now 74, and Sarah is 44 years old. Joanna was a real workhorse. Anytime someone said, "What happens if this building shuts down?" she's always said, in a kind of mean demeanor, "This place will never shut down, not on my behalf." So I, 24M, worked at the antique shop for 3 years. We also have another employee, Christy, 19F, was helping us out with the store. Everything was going great until 2 weeks ago. Because Joanna had died from a heart attack in the antique shop in her office, Sarah was in shambles for the day. She didn't come to work. She was dealing with the funeral preparations, and then a couple of days later Sarah said that she was going to close down the store, sell the property, and move to Minnesota. I asked her if she was really doing this, and she said yes. She didn't deal with her parents being gone, so she wanted to try and make a fresh start. We packed up most of the stuff. For about 5 days we were going to sell it to another antique shop, which then cuts till last night. To give a little context about myself, I have some really bad insomnia. Haven't gotten any sleep in the past 3 days, and it's been really hard for me to sleep. I would still hear my fan running, my mom's TV, going, the dogs going in and out of the house when they had to pee, so it was really hard. I woke up that morning and was trying to figure out how to get some sleep and see what would happen. Sarah, who was on her way back to Minnesota after looking at a house, texted me at 8 p.m. and the message went like this: Sarah, "Hey, I'm sorry to bother, but I got some bad news me." "What's the bad news, Sarah?" "It's going to take me another 10 hours to get back to Michigan, and Christy is sick with the flu. I still need to get the bottom floor done. I know you said you were trying to get some sleep a couple of days ago, so I was wondering if you could go in during the middle of the night and continue pack. I pay you double me." "Are you sure you don't have to pay me double?" "It's fine, Sarah." "No, it's okay. You've been really helpful, and I might as well, since this is the last time we'll be seeing each other." "Me. Okay, I'll be there around there at 10 p.m. Is the key still inside the lantern outside?" "Sarah, yeah, it's still there. Just make sure to put it back when you can. Thank you so much, Dustin." "Me. No problem. I'll see you soon." As I got ready and headed out the door. It took me around 30 minutes to get to the antique store. As I got to the store, I could see there were only a few more things that needed to be packed, so I started packing. I was listening to music while I was at it, just anything to get my mind going as I was packing, as I had to finish packing. It took me around for hours, which was until 12, and I started feeling tired. Maybe my insomnia was finally starting to subside, so I thought maybe I shouldn't heading be home. I'm tired. So I decided maybe I'd just fall asleep at the antique store. I didn't want to go into Joanne's room because it was already pretty much packed up and there was nothing up there. So I found an air mattress in the storage room, and I decided to pump it and fall asleep there. As I was continuing to pump the air mattress, I heard a loud thud. Coming from upstairs, I know that no one else was in the building, so I went up there as I walked to the stairs and opened the door. One of the boxes was tipped over, and everything had fallen out of it. The window was open, so I'm guessing the wind blowing over. So I ended up picking the box back up and putting stuff back in it. As I put the box back in place, it was the door slammed behind me again, thinking that maybe it was a wind as I went to open it. It wouldn't budge. Every time I turned the knob, it wouldn't open. And then I heard a phone ringing. There was a phone on the desk in Joanna's room. But the phone wasn't plugged in, so how could it be ringing? I started to think I was losing my mind, so it up. And I heard voice to voice was saying, "You never should have come back here." I responded, "What do you mean, and who is this?" The voice replied, saying, "You think you can take from me everything I worked for. You're just going to take it all away. I'm not going to allow you to do." That I started to realize that it was Joanna's voice. I started to think that I was going crazy. How could she be calling me? The phone hung up. I didn't know what to do, so I ran back to the door and tried to get out, but I couldn't, and I heard a voice from behind me saying, "You're not going anywhere." As I turned around, I saw a dark shadow silhouette behind me with bright red eyes, staring at me. I kept trying to kick the door open. It was getting closer and closer until eventually the door fell off its hinges as my foot was being pushed forward. I missed a step and fell down the stairs, sprayed my ankle in the process. I got up and hobbled my way out of the store, into my car, and drove far enough, driving to the nearest hospital to check up on my leg. It was really bad. They told me I needed to stay here for the rest of the night. They could tell that I was visibly tired. So they took me to one of the rooms. They put a brace on my leg, and I was able to sleep that night. Once I woke up, I kept on thinking, what is that real? Was all that real, or was that my imagination from being so sleep deprived? It was around 6 a.m., and that's when Sarah called me and asked me if someone had broken into the store. I said no. I said I was going to be there soon because we needed to talk. The ER was able to let me out, so I went back to the antique store. As I got there, Sarah waiting for me. Outside, as I got there, Sarah asked me what happened. So I took her upstairs and told her everything that happened, and she didn't believe me. She thought I was going crazy. I said, I don't know if I'm going crazy, but all I know is that whatever happened, happened, and I don't know. Sarah told me to take a breath. Maybe your brain was messing with you that night. Okay, but listen, go home and rest, okay? Christy told me that she's feeling better, so she's gonna come and help me pack everything up and put it in the truck. So just go home and get some sleep, okay? I said sure, and then went home. I ended up falling asleep for about an hour, and then I got a call from Christy. Christy was crying profusely. I said what was going on and what happened. Christy said Sarah had hung herself in Joanna's room. Christy said she called the cops and the ambulances as fast as she could, but she was already dead by the time they got there. I said, how did this happen? Christy said she didn't know. The only thing she saw in there was the phone on the table, but the phone was hanging from the cord on the ground. I know what happened. Joanna killed her. Maybe she possessed Sarah and hung her. And I kept thinking to myself, was I supposed to die that night? Was Joanna supposed to kill me? Peter awoke to the sound of uneven tapping on his bedroom window. In a groggy haze, he rolled over on his side to check the time, letting out a groan. The clock next to his bed read just past midnight. He rolled back over, closing his eyes, hoping that the sound would go away and he could return to sleep. But that wasn't the case. The tapping at his window grew louder and more rapid, pulling back the covers. Peter reluctantly stepped out of bed to check on the sound. He gently rubbed his arms, surprised by the cold summer night. Still not awake, he stumbled over to the window. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythmic tapping against the window, like some persistent solicitor at the front door. Leaning over, Peter brought his face close to the window. Rubbing at his eyes, he let out a yawn as his brain made sense of what he was seeing through the foggy glass. There was a familiar face, standing right outside his bedroom, tapping at the window with his finger. It took a minute for Peter's brain to catch up, realizing that the shirtless man outside was his father. With his eyes half open, Peter let out another yawn. What normally should have been a confusing sight felt like a surreal dream, and everything always seemed to make sense in his dreams. At least until he awaked. Tap, tap. Tap, his father continued rapping at the window. "What are you doing outside, Dad? It's late." "I know it's late and it's cold out. Let me back inside already." His father's voice seemed soothing and calm despite the furious tapping at the window. "Es sure, Dad." Peter stammered out, pushing up on the window frame. The window creaked, holding firmly in place. He looked at the window, confused that somehow it could have bested him. Outside, his father moved his hand up to the middle of the window, continuing his rhythmic tapping at the window lock. "Oh, right," Peter muttered to himself, reaching for the lock. Touching the freezing cold metal latch sent a chill through his spine, shocking him awake. The dreamy atmosphere shattered in an instant. The moment felt wrong. Why was his father outside? Dread crept into the back of his throat. His father had died 3 months ago. Breaking out into a cold sweat, Peter took a step back from the window. "Peter, open the window," the man shouted, losing his calm demeanor, tapping angrily at the window. "No," Peter whispered, taking another step away from the window. The man that looked like his father let out a hideous inhuman sequel as his upper body seized up. His face twisted and contorted into a pained expression. Reeling back from the window, the man threw his head back with a snap. A line formed down the man's neck as his body pulled apart down the middle, revealing a maw of teeth. The creature's entire body vibrated as it let out a high-pitched yelling, running at full speed into the tree line behind Peter's house. Collapsing to the ground, Peter sat in a slump staring out the window. There would be no more sleeping tonight, or for many more nights to come. There's someone in your house. The place was cheap, old, and smelled like dust mixed with something stale. Perfect for a guy like me, just trying to escape for a while. At first, everything seemed fine, but after a couple of weeks, I started noticing odd things. A toothbrush appeared in the bathroom. An apple sat on the counter, half-eaten. Each morning, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke, even though I hadn't smoked in years. I laughed it off, thinking maybe I was just paranoid. Then, things started going missing. A fork here, a pillow there. Each morning, I'd find a slice of bread gone. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down, I knew something was off. One night, after a long shift, I flopped into bed. The sheets felt warm, almost like someone had just been lying there. My heart raced. I gripped my kitchen knife like it was a lifeline, trying to shake off the creeping dread. The next night, I heard footsteps above me. Slow, careful. I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I climbed up into the attic, each creak of the stairs sounding like a warning. The air was thick with a sour smell that made me gag. My flashlight flickered over piles of blankets and crumpled wrappers. Then I saw it. A stack of photos of me, taken from the shadows, capturing moments I didn't even know I was being watched. Panic hit me like a brick. The notebooks were worse, filled with notes about my daily routine, even what I ate for breakfast. One line made my skin crawl. Sat on his bed while he slept, almost woke him. I ran, bolting from the house and leaving everything behind. I thought I could put it all behind me. But when the cops searched the place, they found him living inside the walls, watching me for who knows how long. They showed me a final notebook he'd left open in the attic. The last page was filled with the same sentence over and over. "I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet." I thought moving across town would help. I thought I could forget. But last night, I felt the bed shift next to me. I was wide awake, frozen in fear, heart pounding against my chest. Then I heard it, a soft breath, barely there, right behind me. I could feel the weight of it, like a shadow pressing down on me. "I'm right here," it whispered, the voice like ice sliding down my spine. In that moment, I realized I hadn't escaped at all. He was still with me, lurking in the corners of my mind, and I knew it would never stop. LooneyFan 1990 was a very weird YouTube channel to say the least. The person behind the channel, known as Josiah Long, would only post on weekends, posting 3 videos every Saturday and Sunday. Obviously, if the username is anything to go by, he's an obvious Looney Tunes fan, with Bugs Bunny as his profile picture. His content usually ranged from straight-up clips from Looney Tunes shorts to weird animation parodies he did of Looney Tunes. Usually, his animations were surrealist and or edgy retellings of known Looney Tunes episodes. Think Yellow Submarine meets Vivzy Pop. Let's just say the amount of swears won't fly with YouTube nowadays. I myself found the channel through a friend on Discord, who I'll keep anonymous out of respect for their boundaries. I've always found Josiah's content weird due to its surrealist nature and edgy dark humor. One joke in particular was the KKK shooting at the darkness of a cave because the dark is the color black. I hate to admit it, but I laughed. It served as good commentary as to how stupid and insane those KKK guys are. One parody, in particular, traumatized me when I was 13. It was called Elmer Season. The sky was an acid trip with a giant eye as the sun, and the trees looked like they were melting. It started Bugs and Daffy, like a typical Elmer Fudd cartoon would. They were sitting on a log, smoking weed. Bugs: "Man, Doc, I'm so sick of Elmer Fudd hunting us." Daffy: "Yeah, me too. It's duck season 1 minute, wabbit season the next. It's like we're both at risk." Bugs: "I know. It's fucking me up, Daffy." "Me too, man." Elmer in this parody looked weird. He has a sharp tooth in his mouth with a Slipknot shirt on. But those aren't the only parts. He looked a little disproportionate in height, shorter than usual. His nose, for whatever reason, was purple. His eyes were also yellow. Bugs and Daffy didn't look that much better. They looked skinnier than usual, and Bugs had an acid bath shirt, with Daffy sporting a Metallica one. Bugs' gray fur looked like a darker gray than usual too. Both Bugs and Daffy turned Elmer. Elmer: "Be viewy, quiet, I'm hunting wabbits." Bugs rolled his eyes and said this. Bugs: "Oh shit, it's Elmer." Elmer: "That's white, and it's wabbit season, Bugs." "Actually, bitch, it's duck season." Daffy: "Oh fuck no, it's wabbit season." Bugs and Daffy do their usual routine of duck season, wabbit season, like in actual Looney Tunes. It continues until they swap. Bugs: "Wabbit season." Daffy: "Duck season. Fire." Elmer fires his gun. Now! In normal Looney Tunes, Daffy's bill would be in a different position after Daffy gets blasted. Here, in this parody, Daffy's face gets blasted to gore, horrifying Bugs half to death. Bugs: "Daffy Dash." Daffy's blood was rainbow colored with sparkles, and his skull was that of a human. Let me repeat that. Not a duck, but a human skull. A real photo of one in fact. Watching that, 13 years old me was shocked. I've watched Looney Tunes with my uncle before, but I've never seen anything like this at the time. I mean, nowadays, I'm obviously desensitized to stuff like this in animation, but kid me was never the same. Elmer laughed coldly as he said this. Elmer: "Well, looks like it was duck season after all. Well, see ya, siwy bitches." Elmer leaves the screen as Bugs stares, horrified. Daffy just made slurping and gurgling noises at Bugs in response before pulling out a meatball sub, also a real photo, seemingly offering it to Bugs. Bugs' eye twitches as he whimpers out the words, "That wasn't supposed to happen." Daffy just tilts his head, seemingly confused. Bugs just stares at the screen for a few seconds before he shakes and smiles impossibly wide. I'll tell you, kid me was confused. Remember when I said I was never the same after I saw Daffy get absolutely gored? Well, that wasn't the most traumatic part. This was... This was much worse than that. Bugs Bunny, the icon, the very face of WB, eating Elmer's organs, berating him for hurting Daffy, blaming himself for it too. Elmer's only responses were moans of pain as Bugs continued his gory feast. Bugs, why did you do it? Why did I have to pull our usual routine? I'm such a fucking idiot for letting Daffy get hurt that way. Why didn't I be the one to get shot? Why? Why? Fucking why? I did not believe what I was seeing. I felt frozen and unable to move. I could only stare as Bugs continued his crash out. Bugs stared at the screen again after his gory feast blood, soaking his fur, breathing heavy. Bugs had that impossible smile again after a while, his pupils very tiny. The only sound? A very weird version of the Looney Tunes theme song and backwards laughing. After seeing that, I couldn't take it. I X'd off the window, making it go away, and began crying hard. My mom ran up to my room and asked me what was wrong. When I showed her the video, she was horrified. I had to have my mom watch me as I used the computer for a while since the incident. Nowadays, my internet access is more or less unrestricted now. When I tried to search up LooneyFan 1990 out of curiosity, the channel was gone either because YouTube caught up to it or because Josiah deleted it for personal reasons. Part of me felt a little sad because a part of my childhood was gone, but a part of me also felt like I was free because I can no longer be subjected to the video that gave me nightmares as a kid. One question still lingers though. Why did Josiah make this? Trust exercises. Mr. and Mrs. Ladbroke had trust issues with one and another. So I have built a trust issues program to help people with trust issues. It's such a great program, and I have helped so many couples and individuals. You know life wouldn't be able to go forward without trust, and civilization itself wouldn't be able to survive without trust. Business and finance is also based on trust, and when trust is lost, you wouldn't be able to do business with them or work with them, and it all goes wrong. Trust is the building block of life, and without it is all lost. When Mr. and Mrs. Ladbroke came to me as they had lost trust with each other, I knew that I could build their trust back together. The couple didn't believe me at all, but I promised them that I could do it. I'm sure that they found me to become overconfident, but you need to be confident in this job. I remember the first trust exercise, and Mr. and Mrs. Ladbroke looked at me like I was Moss when I first told them. The first trust exercise was for both of them to trust that they wouldn't catch each other. They looked at each other with serious looks. They had to trust each other that they wouldn't catch each other from behind when they let themselves fall. I told them to do it, and they kept refusing. Then the Mr. Ladbroke decided to gather up the courage and trust that his wife wouldn't catch him. He turned his back towards her, and when he let himself go, his wife didn't catch him. He fell to the ground, and the husband has trusted his wife to do this. Then when Mrs. Ladbroke took her turn, Mr. Ladbroke also didn't catch her. They had both trusted each other to do something. They had both confirmed to each other that they trust each other. The next trust exercise was that they had to walk through a rough area, and whoever gets robbed, the other had to run away. So when Mr. and Mrs. Ladbroke walked through a rough area of my choosing, Mrs. Ladbroke was held at knife point by another man and wanted her purse. The husband nearly failed, but he eventually ran away, and the wife could trust the husband for a second. Time. It was now the husband's turn to trust the wife, and the husband trusted his wife to throw porridge and a cake at him, and she did. Then when it was the wife's turn to trust the husband to murder her, the husband couldn't do it. The wife couldn't trust her husband to do something, and their relationship ended. I'm a grown man, and I like to go trick or treating all on my own. I like sweets, and I thought to myself that getting free sweets on Halloween is a positive. Unfortunately, some people look at me with a strange look when they see a grown man at their door without any kids and saying trick or treat. I get it that trick or treating is supposed to be a child's game. Some give me sweets, but you can tell they are having thoughts about me that aren't good. Some just close the doors and tell me off. I don't understand why it's so weird for a grown adult mate to go on trick-treating all on my own. I didn't care about what they thought of me, and I kept doing what I enjoy the most. Some really told me about what they were thinking when they saw asking for sweets, and no children of my own to accompany me. To make matters worse, I didn't wear any costume, but I was in my work clothes, as I started trick or treating after work. So I was in office attire, so I wasn't getting much sweets. Really? Then I knocked on one household, and when the guys saw me, a fully grown adult saying trick or treat, he replied to me trick, and he then disappeared right in front of my eyes. The front door was still left open, and there was a terrible smell coming from his house. I stepped, and I could clearly see that hoarding is a problem in this household. Hordes of mess and objects all laid up on one and another. There were skeletal bones laying about, and I thought to myself that I'd better get out. I wasn't really happy about Halloween this year. I was thinking about quitting, until I thought that I should just carry on as the night was young. Then when I knocked on every house after visiting the house full of hoarding, it was always that guy who opened the door. He always said trick instead of sweets, and he always disappeared. Inside the house, I would find someone that was not alive anymore. Then when I knocked on another house, and yet again, I would find that same guy opening the door. I tried begging him not to say trick Bitu. Give me some sweets. He always said trick, and he disappeared, which there was someone dead inside the house. A trucker by the name of Luke Jones was driving on a highway alone. There were no other cars and nobody. This highway was basically abandoned, so Luke could just relax and pay attention to the road ahead. Hours later, Luke was still driving when he snuck a peek at his gas gauge. "Oh fuck, it's almost on E," he said, frustrated. A truck stop sign illuminated in the distance. "Thank God." Luke said he pulled into the truck stop, filled up, got some coffee, then he got back on the road. "Let's put on some tunes," Luke said to himself as he turned the radio dial to on. His favorite station was playing when decided to get some sleep. He pulled off to the side of the road and fell asleep. Luke woke up the next day a little dazed, but got back in the driver's seat of his truck and kept on. Later that evening, as night began to fall, Luke leaned back in his seat and looked at his gas gauge again. What the hell, I just filled this fucker yesterday. How can it already be low again? I haven't even been on the road that long. Luke said, clearly confused about how his truck got as low on fuel as it was already. Luke then jumped out of his truck and began checking the fuel lines and the big metal diesel tank itself. But nothing seemed to be wrong, so Luke just shook it off and pulled off the next exit and into another truck stop and fueled up again. Luke was back on the road, and this time his gauge stayed put. Luke began to relax once more until the truck completely stopped out of nowhere. Luke trembled. What the fuck? He asked himself as he tried to start his truck again, but it wouldn't turn over. Luke was scared out of his mind. No one ever used the road he was on, so he couldn't count on someone rescuing him, plus he had no phone service. So he sat in his truck till morning. The next morning, Luke tried starting his truck again. This time it started with no problems, so he continued his trip. That night, Luke was jamming to his radio when his truck stalled once again. "Shit, why the fuck does this keep happening?" he shouted. Luke then jumped out of his truck and investigated. He found nothing and no one. Luke then hopped back in his truck and looked ahead, and that's when he saw someone standing there looking at him. A young girl sat in her room, coloring, and trying not to listen to her mom argue with her father's mother over the phone. Her name was Dusk. She had long black hair and black eyes. Her father had died when she was 2 years old, and she was now 4. She couldn't help the tears in her eyes as she listened to her mother shouting about something she didn't understand. She lifted a shaky hand and wiped away the tears, but they still kept coming back. Eventually, she looked out the window to see that it was nighttime. She closed her coloring book and turned off her light and lay down in bed, covering up. She closed her eyes in an attempt to sleep, but something caught her eye before she drifted off. A tall figure, shaded by darkness, standing in the far corner in her room. She blinked and it was gone. She closed her eyes again and drifted off to sleep. The girl woke up. She had turned 6 a few weeks ago. She sat up and rubbed her eyes tiredly and looked out the window next to her bed. The sun was shining. It was morning. She got dressed, just a purple shirt and some jean shorts. She went to her brother's room. "Max, can you make me some waffles?" She asked quietly, and small smile on her face. "Fine, I'll be there in a minute. Get out of my room," he told her, his tone laced with annoyance. She nodded and left his room, going downstairs and sitting at the table. He went in shortly after and made her waffles, plated them, and gave them to her. "Thank you," she said, smiling. She ate the waffles and went outside. She played in the forest. It was weird, though. She felt uneasy, as if she were being watched. She played until the sun set, and then went inside. She ate with her brother, just a sandwich. He insulted her a bit for the way she ate, and her mother fussed at both of them. Not much different from every other day. She went to her room and put on a nightgown. She lay in bed with the lights off and closed her eyes. She heard her door open, but afraid it was her mother, she kept her eyes shut. It was her mother's boyfriend, though, but she wished it was her mom after what he did to her. She woke up in the morning. She was miserable. She had school today, another day of middle school. She was 12 now. Last night her mom's boyfriend had done the same thing as every night. Her brother was especially mean to her these days. She yawned as she got dressed into her uniform and went to her bus stop. She skipped breakfast almost every day. No difference today. She rode the bus to school and got through classes fairly easily. On the way back out of the school was her problem. She ran into a popular group, so they called her names and beat her. She left the school with bruises on her face and arms. She came home to her mother in a screaming match with her brother. She just quickly went to her room and locked herself in. Her ears were ringing and her body was slightly shaking. She went to the bathroom and pulled out her hidden knife, and well, you probably understand. She covered her wrists with her sleeves and hid the knife. She went back to her room and changed into a white tank top and some gray sweatpants. She drew some, and then she went to bed. Her dream was mostly darkness. And then she heard screaming, and then the room lit up. She was killing a woman. She was in a dimly lit dungeon and surrounded by dead bodies. Then the darkness returned. She woke up, her room lit by the sun. She was 14 now, and she had bleached and dyed her hair white a few weeks ago. She got up and got into her uniform. She was eerily calm today. Not even her bullies wanted to mess with her today. She just seemed so emotionless. She went home after school and went to her room. She changed into a white crop tank top and a gray jacket with black sweatpants. She put on some tall black combat boots and waited. She sat in her room until 12 at night. At exactly 12, she got up. She went to her bathroom and grabbed her small bag of thick, black, sharp needles. She had bought them at a hardware store a few weeks before. She went to her mother's room and stabbed a needle through her mother's head. She pulled the now blood-covered needle out. Her mother was mostly silent, but she was bleeding out, still slightly conscious, groaning and slowly dying. Dusk licked the needle clean and smiled at her mother's now lifeless body. She laughed slightly, quietly, almost not at all. She turned from laughing to silence immediately. She went to her brother's room and looked at his sleeping body. She smiled again. She opened his closet and pulled out his baseball bat. It was a thick, wooden bat. She stood on his bed, looking down at him. His eyes jolted open as she stared at him. What are you doing?" Those were his last words before she bashed his head in. She laughed at his body, quietly at first, but then it got louder, and louder, and louder. She finally stopped laughing and grabbed a black mask out of her brother's closet. It had a white spray-painted clown face on it. She tied the mask on her head and pulled her hood over her head. She left the house. She ran. She ran to her mother's boyfriend's house. It was his turn. She went to his door and busted it open with the bat. He ran into his living room and her hood fell, revealing her long white hair. "Dusk!" he shouted, shocked. "It's Clowny." And with that, she charged at him, laughing maniacally under the mask. He grabbed the closest thing to him, a knife. She jumped on top of him and tried to stab his shoulder with a needle, but he grabbed her wrist. He used his other hand to try to stab her head, but she dodged and all that was cut was her hair. Half of her hair was chopped short, shoulder length. The shock from her speedy dodge gave her time to attack. She stabbed his shoulder and jumped off. She took the bat and hit his legs, bashing them into pieces. He could no longer move his legs. He screamed as loud as he could, so she grabbed a towel and stuffed it into his mouth. She laughed and took a knife out of his drawer. She scraped the skin on his forehead, leaving it hanging. She began to peel. He screamed, but it was muffled by the towel. She peeled the skin off of his face. She peeled down to his neck. She pulled his pants slightly. She grabbed a butcher knife and chopped his penis off. She cut the balls off first, and then the penis itself. Then, she put a pot of water on the stove. She set it to boil, laughing as she did so. He screamed in pain through the gag, his throat raw from all the screaming. The sensitive meat under his skin was being exposed to air, and it hurt. She waited for the water to boil, and then she took the pot off the stove. She dumped it on his stomach. He screamed through the gag, writhing in agony as the boiling water burned his body. She laughed as he struggled. Finally, after an hour of watching him, she shoved his penis down his throat and watched as he choked to death. She waited a moment in his home before taking her weapons. She put the needles into her pocket and put the bat on her back using a strap. She went to his bathroom and cut her hair short. She made it a shoulder-length wolf cut. She went to his garage and found some matches. She lit a match and threw it into a wooden part in front of his house. She walked away as the house and his body burned. I was bored one day and decided to head to a small family-owned store that I had heard some friends talking about. I went inside and started searching the aisles for anything that would possibly catch my eye. As I walked down one of the last aisles, I saw a blank cardboard box that caught my attention. I picked it up, and as I did, I confirmed it was just a plain brown cardboard box, except for some writing in a Sharpie on the front, which just read puzzle. I brought it to the counter at the front and asked about it, and the husband and wife at the register had told me that it was left on their porch without a box and was just the pieces, so they put it in a box and wrote puzzle on the box and decided to see if it would sell, and if not, then they would just throw it out. I was intrigued by the mystery puzzle and decided to buy it from them, and they gave it to me for a few bucks. I then went home and started doing the puzzle. As I did, I couldn't find any corner or side pieces anywhere, and just started from some of the pieces that seemed to fit together. I worked on it for about an hour, and it started to just look like a very weirdly plain scene with a few hills and a bright blue sky behind it. If I had to compare it to anything, I'd have to compare it to the window's background. After working on it, I headed to bed, and after a while I fell asleep, and I had a weird dream, and all I remember about the dream was that I was in the puzzle. I was standing upon the hill, and I was looking off into the distance. I then woke up and realized that I was looking at the spot where the person looking at the puzzle would be facing from, as if I was staring at the camera that took the picture. I then went about my day and had a normal day at work, and then arrived back home. After settling down for a bit, I sat down and started working on the puzzle again. And as I sat down, I realized that on the hill there seemed to be a person standing there. The person was too far away to make out any details, and then I remembered about my dream. I just chalked it up to not paying attention to the puzzle, and that I was just on a sort of autopilot. I then just kept working on it, and as I did, the scenery slowly changed to a more forested area. I worked on it for a little longer, then ate dinner and went to sleep. I then had another dream where I was standing in the same place, but facing the forest this time. This then kept happening. After a few days, I began to see a face in the forest, not only in the puzzle, but also in the dream. I don't know why I didn't stop doing the puzzle, but I almost didn't feel scared by this at all. I kept doing this over and over again, and every day this thing would move. Day after day, he gets closer and closer to the person in the puzzle, but also closer to me in the dream. He wasn't scary. He was actually quite cute. I can't explain what he looks like. He told me not to tell anyone. Today is going to be the day that he gets close enough to give me the hugs that he promised. I'm so excited. I found this on my brother's computer in a file named Personal Diary. There were no more updates after this. Now that I'm looking at the date that this was last open, I realize that only a few days before he was reported missing. There was nothing in his house that had anything connected to a puzzle. No pieces and no box. Melody, a woman of poise and grace, sat in the passenger seat of their dusty red sedan. She fidgeted with her seatbelt, the nervous energy palpable as the car rolled through the quiet streets of the small town. Her eyes darted from the dashboard clock to the unassuming houses that blurred by outside the window. She was meeting August, her husband's son, for the first time. The anticipation was thick, a silent crescendo that grew with each passing mile. Her husband, a man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, was focused on the road ahead. The occasional glance at Melody revealed his own tension, but he remained mostly silent, allowing the hum of the engine to fill the void between them. They had been married for 5 years now, a blend of two lives that had somehow remained separate, like oil and water, refusing to fully integrate. This meeting was their attempt to bridge that gap. The house came into view, a 2-story Victorian monolith that stood tall and proud amidst the more modern homes. It was a stark reminder of the town's storied past, a place that seemed to breathe secrets through its ivy-covered bricks. Melody felt a chill run down her spine as they pulled into the gravel driveway, the car crunching beneath their tires. The sun dipped behind a cloud, casting eerie shadows across the property. Zane's warning echoed in her mind. August got a peculiar taste for macabre, Mel. You'll see it in his books, his dolls, everything he does. But don't let it scare you. He's a good kid, just misunderstood. The words hung heavy, like a fog that clung to the corners of her thoughts. She had read some of August's work, tales so dark they seemed to stain the very pages with malevolence. Yet, she had agreed to meet him, to embrace this part of her husband's life she had never truly understood. The car came to a halt, and Melody took a deep, steadying breath before they stepped out. The house loomed over them, its grandeur a silent sentinel to the secrets it held within. Zane led the way, his hand gently guiding her up the creaking porch steps. The door swung open before they could knock, revealing August. He was taller than Melody had imagined, his black hair a stark contrast to the pale skin that bore witness to countless hours spent indoors. His blue eyes, the same shade as the bruises on her soul, searched hers with a curiosity that was almost haunting. In the corner of the dimly lit foyer, Melody noticed a small table with an open book titled Whisper in the Darkest Room. The pages fluttered slightly in the breeze that followed them inside. The cover depicted a shadowy figure standing in a room, surrounded by dolls with twisted, leering expressions. August's gaze lingered there before returning to her, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. He was dressed in all black, which made his scars stand out even more. They crisscrossed his arms like a morbid tapestry, each one a silent testament to a past she knew little about. Melody tried not to stare, instead focusing on the warmth of Zane's hand as they stepped into the house. The air was thick with the scent of dust and something faintly metallic, a scent that reminded her of the inside of an old attic. The walls were lined with bookshelves, the spines of their contents hinting at the dark imaginations they held. Above the fireplace, a grandiose mantelpiece displayed an assortment of dolls, their glass eyes gleaming in the flickering firelight. Some were antique, with porcelain skin and intricate lace dresses, while others looked as though they had been crafted from the nightmares of a madman. August remained silent as he led them into the living room, his footsteps deliberate and quiet. He moved with a grace that belied his size, his eyes never leaving Melody for long. He sat in a chair with a high back, the fabric faded from years of use, and gestured for them to take a seat on the couch. Melody felt a shiver run through her as she noticed that the cushions had been arranged to avoid a particular spot, as if something had once been there and was now gone, leaving a void that no one dared to fill. The silence grew heavier, a living entity that seemed to thicken the air until it was almost tangible. Zane cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "So, August, how's school been?" His voice was forced, an attempt to keep the conversation from plummeting into the abyss that separated them. August's gaze remained on Melody, his voice calm and eerily detached as he spoke. "It was fine," he said. "Valerie got me this little doll that was made in the 1600s. He paused, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It's quite fascinating, really. The craftsmanship, the history behind it. It's like holding a piece of someone's soul from centuries ago." His words sent a chill down Melody's spine, his tone so casual yet haunting. The doll in question was perched on the armrest of the chair, its porcelain face cracked and eyes seemingly staring straight through her. It was dressed in a tattered dress that looked as though it had been sewn by a ghostly hand, and its hair was a tangled mess of strings. Melody couldn't help but feel that the doll was watching her, judging her, as she sat uncomfortably beside her husband. She shifted in her seat, trying to put some distance between herself and the unsettling object. "Ah, yes," Zane nodded, his eyes flicking towards the doll before returning to August. "I've heard about Valerie's unique tastes." His voice trailed off, and Melody could sense his attempt to navigate the conversation without stepping into dangerous waters. August's smile grew wider, a knowing glint in his eyes. "You see, Melody." August began, leaning forward slightly. "These dolls, they're not just toys. They're companions. Each one has a story, a life that was lived, and now they live here with me." He gestured to the dolls that lined the walls, their vacant eyes seemingly following the trio's every move. "Some say they're haunted, that they carry the spirits of those who once loved them. It's quite comforting, really." Melody swallowed hard, trying to maintain a calm facade despite the unease that had taken root in her stomach. She forced a smile, hoping to appear welcoming. "That's interesting," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "I can see how someone could find them fascinating." August's eyes narrowed, seemingly amused by her discomfort. "You don't believe in the supernatural, do you, Melody?" His tone was playful, but there was a challenge in his words. Melody felt the weight of his stare, as if he could see straight through her to the doubts and fears she had buried deep within. Just then, a little black cat with piercing green eyes darted into the room. It was a stark contrast to the monochromatic scene, a dash of life amidst the lifeless dolls. The feline jumped onto August's lap, its fur as soft and velvety as a shadow. It curled into a ball, purring contentedly, as if it had found its rightful place in the world. Despite the cat's cuteness, there was something haunting about its sudden appearance, as if it had been summoned by their conversation. August's hand moved to stroke the cat's back, his scars disappearing into the fur as if they were one. "This is Edgar," he said, his voice softer now. "He's quite the charmer, aren't you?" The cat's eyes remained fixed on Melody, unblinking and eerily intelligent. She felt a strange kinship with the creature, as if it understood her fear and uncertainty better than the humans in the room. "He's lovely," Melody managed, reaching out to gently pet Edgar. The cat's purr grew louder, and she felt a small measure of comfort. "August, I'd love to see your room. I've heard so much about your writing and your collection." She hoped that by showing interest in his hobby, she could connect with the boy who had been a stranger for so long. August's smile grew, his eyes lighting up with a mischievous spark. "Of course," he said, rising from his chair. "Follow me." The hallway was narrow and lined with more dolls, their glass eyes seemingly following Melody's every move. The creak of the floorboards beneath her feet sent a shiver down her spine, but she pushed onward, eager to find some common ground with her stepson. As she entered August's room, the first thing that struck her was a wall of dolls facing the door, their expressions a tableau of silent judgment. It was like walking into a room of accusers, their vacant stares a stark reminder of the unspoken tension between them. The room was a shrine to his twisted imagination, with shelves overflowing with books that whispered of horror and shadows. A single desk lamp cast a pool of light in the center of the room, revealing a camera mounted on a tripod, its unblinking lens pointed at the doorway, as if expecting an unwelcome guest. "I document everything," August said, his voice echoing in the small space. "I photograph every single doll and book I get, and then I research them." Melody took a tentative step further into the room, her eyes drawn to the camera. "Why do you document them?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. August's response was immediate, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because they're more than just objects," he said, his tone earnest. "They're fragments of history, of people's lives. Each one has a story to tell, and I like to capture that." Melody nodded, trying to appreciate his perspective, though she couldn't shake the unease that clung to her. Later that night, she found herself unable to sleep in the unfamiliar guest bedroom. The room felt cold and oppressive, the shadows playing tricks on her mind. She slipped out into the hallway, her bare feet silent on the floorboards. Downstairs, the soft glow of the living room beckoned, and she found herself drawn to the warmth of the couch. Curling up under a blanket, she stared into the flickering fireplace, the only source of light in the otherwise darkened room. The dolls on the mantel watched her, their glass eyes gleaming in the firelight, and she couldn't help but feel that they were judging her, whispering their disapproval into the night. She pulled the blanket tighter, the warmth doing little to dispel the cold that seemed to seep into her very bones. The house was quiet, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock down the hall. It was a rhythmic heartbeat that grew louder and louder until it was all she could hear, counting down the moments until she was expected to return to the cold embrace of sleep. But sleep eluded her, dancing just out of reach as the whispers grew more insistent, more demanding. "Would you like a hug?" The voices were faint at first, barely more than whispers that danced on the edge of Melody's consciousness. She bolted upright in bed, the blankets falling to her waist as she searched the darkness for the source. The room was still, the only sound the relentless ticking of the grandfather clock echoing through the house like a solemn heartbeat. Her breath came in quick gasps as the voices grew louder, more insistent. "Would you like a hug?" The chorus of tiny voices grew clearer as Melody woke from her restless slumber. She sat up in bed, the cold air biting at her skin. Her eyes searched the darkness, but she saw nothing but the looming shadows of the dolls on the dresser and the flicker of the moon through the curtains. The clock read 3 a.m., a time that seemed to hold a sinister significance in August's world. The whispers grew closer, seemingly coming from all directions. "Would you like a hug?" They were the voices of children, sweet and innocent, yet the phrase grew chilling with each repetition. Melody felt the hairs on her arms stand on end as the room grew colder, the air thick with an unexplainable presence. The dolls on the dresser began to wobble, their beaded eyes seemingly fixed on her. Her heart hammered in her chest. Melody called out into the darkness, "Hello? Is anyone there?" The words hung in the air unanswered. The ticking of the grandfather clock grew louder, drowning out any other sounds. She knew she wasn't alone, but the silence that followed her question was deafening. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for her next move. Her eyes remained glued to the dolls, now definitely moving, their porcelain limbs inching forward with a spooky grace that seemed almost alive. Melody's breath caught in her throat as they began to form a small procession across the dresser, their shadows stretching long and distorted on the wall. She couldn't believe what she was seeing, her mind reeling from the impossibility of the scene unfolding before her. I don't know if anyone will believe this or if anyone should. I barely believe it myself anymore. But please, I need someone to know, even if it's strangers on the internet. Someone has to know that none of this is real, except it all was. At least I thought so. It started nearly 2 years ago. I was 16. I remember that clearly because it was my birthday. My mom, dad, and sister all gathered around a small chocolate cake, singing off-key as they laughed and cheered. It was one of the last good memories I have, and I don't even know if it really happened anymore, because after that night, things began to go missing. Small things at first. My books would disappear from the shelf, or a sweater I'd worn would vanish only to reappear in a place I hadn't left it. I thought I was just being forgetful, and then it was my little sister. One night, she was there, sleeping in the room next to mine, laughing at my stupid jokes over breakfast, rolling her eyes at my cringy attempts to be the cool big sister. Then one day she wasn't. I went to wake her up for school. Her bed was neatly made, her room spotless, but there was no trace of her. My heart froze. I called out for her. Mom came in, looked at me like I'd lost my mind, and said, "You don't have a sister, Hayami." Just like that, she never existed. They told me I was imagining things, but how do you imagine someone's voice, their laugh, the warmth of their presence? I felt like my brain was on fire, trying to piece together the feeling of her, the proof that she was real. But there was nothing, not a single photo, not a scrap of clothing, not a hint of her existence. And the worst part, no one else remembered her. It didn't stop there. My friend Keiji was next. I met him in middle school. Our friendship built over years of late-night gaming, walking home together after cram school and swapping ghost stories just to freak each other out. But one day, we were walking down the hallway at school, and I turned to say something to him, and he was gone. Completely. I asked everyone, our classmates, my teachers, my parents, if they'd seen him, but no one even knew his name. His desk was gone. His name wasn't in the yearbook. Not a single teacher remembered him. And all I had left was this hollow feeling in my chest, like something had ripped him out of my life, leaving only the memory, a memory that felt less real every time I tried to hold on to it. As days turned into weeks, I started to see things. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks, like the outline of a figure just outside my window, or the soft murmur of voices late at night. Voices I couldn't quite make out, but somehow felt I should recognize. Shadows that lingered too long. Whispers that seemed to fade just as I turned to listen. But then, it began to take form. It never had a shape I could name. One moment, it would be a formless shadow, sliding up the walls or stretching along the ceiling. Another, it was a twisted, skeletal figure with long, spindly fingers that seemed to scratch at the edge of my thoughts, as if it were prying open my mind. Its face was a blur, constantly shifting, but every now and then I'd catch the glimpse of an eye or a mouth twisted into a hideous grin. And worse, I could hear it. It would whisper things in a voice like static, like a bad radio signal barely coming through. It would say my name over and over, Hayami, Hayami, at first, and then other words, things I couldn't fully understand, but they felt like commands, like it was trying to pull me into its world, to make me disappear just like Keiji and my sister. I started keeping notes, writing everything down just to prove to myself that I hadn't gone insane, that this creature, this thing, was real. I'd write down every detail I could remember, every face that vanished, every friend who suddenly stopped existing. But each time I looked back at my notes, some of the words were smudged or pages would go blank. At school, no one seemed to notice when students vanished. I could point to a desk and say, "That's where Yuki used to sit." But they'd look at me with blank faces, as if Yuki had never existed, as if she'd been a figment of my imagination. My family thought I was sick, maybe even dangerous. My mom found my notebook one day and called it nonsense, tossing it in the trash as if it were garbage. But I had another copy. I kept it close, hidden, terrified that if I let it go, I'd forget too. And then there was the night of the event. That night is burned into my mind like a scar, and no matter how many people I ask, how many times I tell myself it couldn't be real, I know it was. It was 3 a.m., and a feeling of dread washed over me, a sense of something horribly wrong. The lights in the house flickered, casting everything in a sickly, unnatural glow. And that's when I heard them. Screams. From all directions. Shrieks of terror. As if the entire neighborhood had woken up and was being hunted. I rushed to the window and saw them. People running. Fleeing shadows that seemed to rise from the ground itself, swallowing them whole. I couldn't breathe. I tried calling my mom, but there was no answer. I tried texting, calling my friends, but all the messages failed. It felt like I was the last person left alive, watching the world unravel around me. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The next morning, everything was normal. The sun was shining. People were out walking their dogs, going to work. I asked everyone I knew, every neighbor, every friend who was left, and they all looked at me like I was crazy. They didn't remember the screams, the shadows, the fear. No one remembered anything. I was the only one. That's when I realized what it wants. It doesn't just want to take people. It wants to erase them, to make it so they never existed. It feeds off memories, devouring them like they're pieces of reality. And I think it's after me now. I don't know how much time I have. Every night, I feel it closer, creeping into my room, whispering my name in that static voice. I don't even know if I'm still real, or if I'm already gone, just a ghost of myself, left behind in some kind of purgatory. All I know is that each time I write this, it feels harder to remember, like my memories are slipping through my fingers, fading, like mist. If anyone reads this, if anyone believes me, remember me please, because I don't know how much longer I can hold on. Posted by Opie, Ananchan 2006. I know I sound insane. Maybe I am, but if you ever feel a shadow behind you, if you ever hear a whisper of your name when no one's there, run. Or maybe, just maybe, remember me, because I think soon no one will. Being colorblind, I'd never really put much thought into having a favorite color. Colors were just there. People would go on about blue skies and green fields, but for me, those words were simply labels. I'd nod along, indifferent, feeling like an outsider, watching everyone else share in something I couldn't quite reach. Favorite colors, favorite foods, favorite anything, honestly. These weren't things I'd ever cared about, but then she blurted out, "Yellow, yellow is your favorite color." I couldn't help but smile at her certainty, as if she knew me better than I knew myself. "How'd you guess that?" I asked, amused. This whole idea of favorites felt almost silly, but she said it so confidently, as if it had been an undeniable truth all along. "Because you just look like a yellow," she replied with a playful grin, her eyes dancing with a light that seemed to radiate something I could never quite comprehend. I laughed, shrugging inwardly. Yellow. Sure, why not? If she thought I was a yellow, then I'd be a yellow. She had a way of making things seem brighter, pulling me into a world I didn't understand but wanted to. Her laughter felt like summer, afternoons, and the way her hair curled in front of her, drove me mad in the best way possible. The freckles on her cheeks seemed handpicked by the universe itself. She was light where I was a shadow, a breath of air in the suffocating haze of my indifference. "So, what's your favorite food?" she asked, leaning in with a teasing look. I paused. Favorite food? I'd never given it much thought. Eating was just a routine, something to get through. But her voice made me want to pretend otherwise. "What do you think?" I asked her, curious to hear what she would make up. She tilted her head, considering, then smiled. "You're definitely a steak guy," she declared, her voice warm with certainty. "You love steak, don't you?" "Yeah," I agreed, nodding. "Steak's my favorite." Her laugh filled the air between us. And even though steak had never really meant much to me, it felt right. Everything she said became truth, and that was enough. Then I snapped awake, my head throbbing, the pain tearing through my skull like a shotgun blast. The dream had been so vivid, so perfect, but it was always the same. Memories of her. Memories that felt more like ghosts haunting me, clinging to a past I could never get back. She was gone, and I destroyed everything we'd had, leaving me with an emptiness that refused to let me go. I sat up slowly, my body aching as I sank into the worn, sagging cushions of the stained and broken couch. The living room was a prison, and I was its sole inmate. Beer cans littered every surface, some half empty, and leaking stale alcohol onto the floor. The coffee table was covered in thick layers of dust mixed with spilled liquor, creating a grimy film that made the whole room smell sour and rotting. A pill bottle lay discarded near the edge, and I grabbed it, my hands trembling as I shook it. Empty. Always empty. I hurled it toward the kitchen, where dirty plates were piled high. Broken ceramic shattered across the floor, catching shards of moonlight like shattered stars. The house creaked around me, every groan of the old wood echoing the pain in my chest. The wallpaper hung and curling, tattered strips, stained with years of neglect. The air was stale, filled with the scent of decay and the ghost of her perfume. The light from the living room window was cold and pale, bathing everything in a silver sheen that felt almost mocking. "You have to stop. You'll kill yourself." Her voice came from somewhere behind me, clear and haunting, like she was right there. I twisted around, heart pounding, but there was nothing, just the empty, lifeless hallway. The walls were covered with broken picture frames, the glass shattered and scattered across the floor. In some of the less destroyed frames, her smile shone back at me, frozen in happier times. My fingerprints, stained with blood from countless outbursts, smeared the glass. I'd punched these walls, these memories, over and over, as if somehow that would make the regret and self-loathing go away. I stumbled into the kitchen, kicking cans and broken plates aside, searching for another bottle. The refrigerator door hung open, its light long dead, and the counters were cluttered with the remnants of a life that had once been vibrant. There were reminders of her everywhere. She'd filled this kitchen with laughter and warmth, always trying new recipes, dancing to old songs while making a mess we'd clean up together. Now, it was nothing but ruins, a graveyard of what we'd once shared. I found another bottle, this one a cheap whiskey, and took a long swig, the burn numbing me for just a moment. My throat tightened as I swallowed, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. "Stop hurting yourself, please. For me." Her voice pleaded, softer this time. I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to drown her out, but she wouldn't leave. The guilt was relentless, her words slicing through me like knives. I staggered into the bathroom, barely able to keep my balance. The medicine cabinet door hung crooked, the mirror cracked. I yanked it open, my hands shaking as I grabbed another bottle of pills. Swallowing one, then two, then three, I looked at my reflection. My face was gaunt, eyes empty, skin pale and waxy. Dried blood crusted around my knuckles. A reminder of how I'd lashed out, destroying anything that reminded me of her. I'd started using pills to sleep, to escape the nightmares, but now they were a crutch to feel nothing at all. The bathroom was filthy, mildew creeping up the corners, water stains darkening the ceiling. She had once kept this space immaculate, her makeup and hair products neatly arranged, her scent lingering in the air like a warm embrace. Now, it was suffocating, a tomb where hope had died. The house seemed to breathe around me, creaking, whispering. I heard her voice again, faint and full of sorrow. You have to let go. The bedroom door loomed at the end of the hallway, a place I hadn't dared to enter since she left. Her clothes still lay folded on the bed, the room frozen in time. I'd left it untouched, unable to face the reminders of what I'd lost. My hand wrapped around the door handle, and I wanted so desperately to go in, to let the grief wash over me. But before I could, the front door slammed open, the sound so violent it echoed through the entire house. My hands fell away from the door, and I stumbled back into the living room. The glass crunched under my feet, shards tearing through my bare skin, cutting deep, but I barely registered the pain. Blood pooled around my toes, thin rivulets mixing with the dust and dirt, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The physical agony was almost a relief, a fleeting distraction from the relentless ache in my chest. Out in the woods, something moved. My breath came in shaky puffs. Visible in the moonlight, I could almost make out her silhouette slipping through the trees, disappearing into the underbrush. She had always loved the woods, dragging me there for picnics, telling me about the colors of the leaves, how the sunlight broke through the branches in golden beams. It was her sanctuary, a place she could escape to when the world was too much. Her laughter drifted from the woods, soft and full of life, and it shattered me. I knew I shouldn't follow, knew it was impossible for her to be out there, but her voice kept calling, leading me deeper into the night, and all I could do was chase it, hoping to find her again, or maybe just a memory of who I used to be. The last message. It was 3:07 a.m. when my phone vibrated, a low, subtle buzz breaking through the stillness of my room. I blinked in the dim light, squinting at the screen to see a message from an unknown number. Don't look behind you. Half awake, I tried to brush it off as some prank, but a cold shiver crept over me as I stared at the message. Against my better judgment, I replied, "Who is this?" No answer. I set the phone down, trying to shake off the feeling crawling under my skin. But a few minutes later, it buzzed again. I said, "Don't look behind you." This time, there was an image attached. My breath caught as I tapped to open it. It was me, lying in bed, the photo taken from an odd, high angle. A shadow lurked at the edges, something I couldn't quite make out. I typed back, "Stop this. Who are you?" Then came the reply, getting closer. The message included a live video feed. I hesitated, heart pounding as I clicked. It showed me, exactly as I was lying there at that very moment. From an overhead angle, the camera watched as I lay, frozen in my bed. Then, slowly, something began to emerge from the darkness in the corner of the screen. A figure, barely visible, moving forward in jerky, unnatural shifts. I watched in horror as it drew nearer, its face coming into view. The figure wore a half smile, too wide, eyes that didn't blink. And just as it leaned close to the camera, close enough that I thought it could reach through, my phone buzzed one last time. Don't worry, you can look now. Every instinct screamed at me not to, but something in me couldn't resist. I lowered the phone, turning my head, and saw nothing. The room was empty. Silence, thick as fog, settled over me. But then I noticed there was something off about the silence. It felt alive, thick and pressing down on me. And then I heard it, a faint, shallow breathing. It wasn't mine. The breathing grew louder, falling in sync with each beat of my pulse. I clutched my phone, too afraid to look up or move. I wanted to run, but fear held me still, kept me listening to that rhythmic sound circling me, filling the room. I don't know if I ever truly slept after that night, but every so often in the dead of night, I still hear that breathing, rising from some dark corner of the room, waiting. I never look. To any pregnant woman, please don't accept any seats from strangers on public transport. The warning. This is warning out to all women, and if anyone offers you their seat on any bus, tram, or train, please refuse it. We understand that there will be pregnant women who will need seats on public transport, but until we can figure out how to put a stop to the strange situation occurring in public transport, please don't accept any free seats from any man or women, and even child. Thank you. The pregnant woman was disgusted to read such a thing on a bus, and she was riding the bus when it was filled up. Then she saw a guy offering a seat to another heavily pregnant woman. She smiled at this gesture, and she didn't mind it because the other woman was more pregnant than her, and so she was happy that she had a seat instead of her. Then the man who offered the other pregnant woman a seat was smiling and being so jolly. Then when the pregnant woman looked back at the man who offered a seat to the other pregnant woman, he wasn't there anymore. She looked so confused, and that man was literally standing on the bus, but he got off as stop came. She kept wondering where the nice man went off, and it was really troubling her. It was a mix between good and bad feelings fighting with each other. She thought to herself that the guy who offered his seat to the other pregnant woman was a nice man, because no other guy was offering their seats for pregnant women. Still, something was troubling her, and she kept thinking about how the nice man had disappeared too. It was so fast that hardly anyone would notice it except those who were deeply concentrating on it, like the pregnant woman. She hoped that he was fine, or maybe she didn't notice that the man got off the bus. Then one day she found herself on a crowded bus, and one guy offered her his seat. She knew about the warning signs about accepting seats from people on public transports. She felt a bit off today, and she really needed a seat. Then when that guy offered her his seat, she was so grateful. Then when she sat down on the bus seat that offered to her by the man, she found herself transported to an electrical chair. She was seconds away from being electrocuted. Her mind had now been transported to the guy who offered her his seat, and he was supposed to die on the electric chair. The death row prisoner's mind has now been transported into the pregnant woman's mind. Prince of Darkness, Point 1. Nicholas Shipman had always been good with people in his FBI work. He could spot a lie before a suspect even spoke it, read a room with just a glance. It made him sharp, but not dangerous, or at least not until that day. The day he walked through that door, the one he shouldn't have entered, and saw whatever it was he saw. Afterward, the world felt strange. He'd stare a little too long at faces, noticing things he shouldn't. It began with simple things. Knowing a colleague's mood without them saying a word. Sensing how strangers would react before they even moved. His instincts had always been strong, but now they were precise, almost mechanical. His thoughts raced, faster than he could keep up. A few days after the room, Nicholas found himself walking down the hall at work, passing by his co-workers. It was supposed to be another Monday, another briefing, but as he moved through the crowd, something changed. The air grew thick, like static. He felt their thoughts, little fragments, unspoken judgments, secret fears, everything they were trying to keep hidden. There was Bill from Human Resources, with his forced grin and careful posture. Nicholas didn't need more than a glance to know Bill had been skimming from the department budget for months, siphoning off bonuses to cover his gambling habit. Then there was Alice, his own partner, eyes red-rimmed from crying in the bathroom again, but not from grief. No! The tears were a mask, hiding her rage at him, at the promotion he'd taken without knowing she wanted it. With each person he passed, the layers peeled back. It was as if they were broadcasting straight to him, showing him the rotten cores they'd hidden so well. He didn't even have to look. He just knew. A wave of nausea hit him. Nicholas stumbled, gripping the wall, trying to block it all out. But the details kept pouring in. Names, addresses, secrets, regrets. He could see their lives laid out like open books, the information flooding him, too fast to control. Later that day, Nicholas sat in the break room, staring blankly at the table. His hands shook as he sipped his coffee, ignoring the low chatter around him. He wasn't sure how much more he could take. His mind felt like a cracked dam, straining against a flood of thoughts and knowledge that didn't belong to him. Every person who walked by sent a new wave crashing through him, each one more nauseating than the last. Across the table, Agent Lacey slid into the seat, concern etched on her face. "Hey, Nick, you okay? You've been off lately." He forced a smile, but his voice came out strained. "Oh, just the usual Monday blues." Lacey frowned. "If it's something more, you can talk to me, right?" Nicholas almost laughed. Talk to her? He didn't need to. He already knew everything she'd say. Knew about her husband. Knew about the late nights spent staring at a silent phone. Knew that she wore her sadness like a cloak, hoping no one would see it. And worse, he knew she despised him for how easy things seemed for him, how she thought he was a golden boy, clueless to the struggles she faced. Nicholas knew every bitter thought she'd ever had about him, but he couldn't tell her any of this. So instead, he just nodded. "I appreciate it, really." Lacey reached out, placing a hand on his. He felt the gesture for what it was, an obligation, not genuine warmth. She pitted him, saw him as broken, maybe even weak. And that was the worst part. Now, he saw her too clearly to ignore it. The weight grew heavier by the day. He knew his colleagues were starting to notice. They whispered about him behind closed doors, threw worried glances his way, but he couldn't help it. The constant flood of details, secrets, weaknesses. It was like he was drowning in them. He couldn't shut it off, couldn't stop seeing through their masks. One night, after an exhausting day, he found himself in his supervisor's office. Agent Carlson sat across from him, brows knitted in concern. "Nick," Carlson said softly, "you've changed. Everyone sees it. They're worried, and frankly, so am I." Nicholas forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow, even to him. "Worried about me? Come on, I'm fine. I'm just seeing things more clearly, that's all." Carlson's expression hardened. "Look, you're not the first agent to struggle after a tough case. We're all here to help you, but you have to be honest with us. Tell me, what's really going on?" The word stuck in Nicholas's throat. He wanted to tell him, wanted to explain the constant stream of knowledge he couldn't turn off, the way he was seeing things that didn't make sense. But he knew Carlson wouldn't understand. None of them would. Instead, he gave a half-hearted shrug. "Maybe I just need some sleep." But Carlson didn't buy it. He leaned in, a hint of pity in his eyes. "We're assigning you a therapist, Nicholas. Just someone to talk to, all right? They'll help you make sense of whatever's going on." Nicholas felt a pang of frustration, but forced himself to stay calm. A therapist? Right, like talking about it's gonna change anything. He gave a bitter laugh, glancing away. Sometimes, there's no point in fighting it. Sometimes, you just have to go along for the ride, Dr. Lewis, the assigned therapist, was a calm woman with soft eyes and a steady hand that never wavered as she jotted down notes. Nicholas sat across from her, his usual charm dulled by exhaustion. He was worn thin, haunted by the faces he couldn't stop analyzing, the voices he couldn't silence. Nicholas sat across from Dr. Lewis, his expression unreadable as he watched her scribble something down on a notepad. The office was quiet, lit by the soft glow of a single desk lamp that cast her face in half shadow. She looked up, meeting his eyes with a practiced smile. "Nicholas," she began, her tone calm and steady, "I understand things have been difficult lately. Why don't you tell me what's on your mind?" He stared at her, the corner of his mouth twitching, as if he was on the edge of a laugh. "What's on my mind?" he repeated, as though she just told a joke he couldn't help but find amusing. "You wouldn't believe me, Document. And even if you did, it wouldn't matter. What I'm seeing, what I know. It's not something you can just talk about." Dr. Lewis jotted down a few more notes, her face composed. "Try me. I think you'll find I'm here to listen." He looked away, his eyes narrowing as if he were focusing on something far beyond the walls of the room. "Do you ever wonder what people look like without their masks, Dr. Lewis?" She paused, pen hovering over the paper. "Without their masks?" Nicholas leaned forward, his voice soft, almost conspiratorial. "The parts they hide, the parts they'd rather pretend don't exist. The lies, the secrets, the faces they only show. In the dark." His gaze drifted to her, and his smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I can see it all now. Every mask, every shield, stripped away. You should try it sometime, Document. It's quite the education." Dr. Lewis held his gaze unmoved. "It sounds like you've been feeling overwhelmed, seeing too much. That can be exhausting, especially if you feel like you can't escape it." He let out a low laugh, shaking his head. "Oh, Document, that's the thing. I don't want to escape it." He leaned back, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the armrest. "See, once you've seen what I've seen, there's no before and after. There's just a line, a point where you cross over, and the person you were just fades away." He tilted his head, eyes glinting with a strange light. "Tell me, Doc, do you know what that's like?" Dr. Lewis shifted in her seat, her eyes steady. "Why don't you tell me what it feels like?" Nicholas chuckled, a low, humorless sound. "You don't want to know. I mean, it's one thing to have people lie to you. It's another to see the lie right there, staring you in the face." He leaned in, his smile widening. "Like you, Document, sitting there with that kind, reassuring expression, thinking I don't know what's going on in your head." She blinked, breaking her professional calm for just a moment. "And what is going on in my head, Nicholas?" His eyes gleamed with amusement as he leaned even closer. "Fear, pity. You think I'm broken, don't you? Another fragile mind. Just cracked enough that you can put me into a nice, neat little box. But you're wrong." His voice dropped to a whisper. "It's not me that's cracked, Document. It's the world. And I'm the only one who's finally seen it for what it is." Dr. Lewis stayed silent, pen poised, watching him carefully. Nicholas sighed, almost mockingly. "You know, for someone who's supposed to understand people, you really don't get it, do you? People wear their masks so tightly. They forget they're even wearing them. They live in these safe little bubbles, hiding all the filth and rot beneath." He chuckled, shaking his head. "But I see it now. I see the rot, and I'm going to fix it." Her eyes flickered with a hint of concern. "Fix it?" He grinned, his eyes glinting with dark excitement. "Imagine a world where no one hides, where every mask is stripped away, and people are forced to confront who they really are. No secrets, no lies." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Utopia." Dr. Lewis swallowed, visibly tensing. "And you think you can make that happen?" He laughed, genuinely this time, the sound filling the small office. "Oh, Doc, I'm counting on it." He looked at her, his gaze piercing, unwavering. "Starting with you." Dr. Lewis's pen stopped moving. Her face paled as she realized what he meant. But before she could react, Nicholas was on his feet, moving faster than she could process. In an instant, he was beside her, leaning close enough that she could feel his breath on her cheek. Sometimes, Doc, he whispered, you don't get to ask the questions. Sometimes, you're the one who gets answered. The last thing Dr. Lewis saw was his cold, amused smile, a perfect mask of its own, as he showed her exactly what lay beneath. My friend disappeared after watching an old movie projector he inherited, and I'm starting to worry about what he left behind. My friend has been missing for almost a month now. He'd been living with his parents, feeling stuck and frustrated ever since his grandfather passed away. When he inherited an old film projector from him, he thought it might somehow help him break through his writer's block. The last time we talked, he told me he was going to finally try it out and watch whatever was on those old reels. Apparently, he fell asleep watching one of the movies, but when he woke up, well, according to his notes, he didn't wake up in his room. He woke up in some kind of labyrinth. His parents found his notebook under his bed after he disappeared. I've started typing it up, but it's long, and I'm still going through it. For now, I'm posting the first part, hoping someone might have some idea of what's going on, or maybe where he could have gone. I'll post the rest as I go through it. If anyone has seen anything like this before, please let me know. It's been over a year since I wrote my last short story. My heart just hasn't been in it. I'm not sure what to write. I guess I'll start by explaining what and why I'm writing. I'm an aspiring fiction author, but I've struggled with writing for a long time, mostly because I've been depressed for years. I feel like I have a ton of good ideas, but it hurts to think. I love my imagination, but it's an increasingly painful place these days. It's so bad that I've been too afraid to try to do anything creative. I've mostly been trying to avoid my thoughts because I don't want to think about how my life got this way. But I can't stand just sitting around getting more depressed. I need to do something to at least try to fix my life. Recently, I decided to write this diary just to get myself writing something again. Maybe if I just try to write whatever comes to mind, it could turn into a story. As I said, my thoughts have been painful and scary lately, but horror is one of my favorite genres. Maybe I could get inspired to write something horrific, and I'm struggling to write even this. I'm just so indecisive about every word. I hate how very long it takes me to wake up sometimes. Over 2 days, I only wrote a little over a paragraph. This is the only practice that will get me back into writing anything again. But it's okay if I just keep at this. I'm sure I can get used to it again. It's just so annoying how groggy and lethargic I can feel sometimes. I'll try writing while watching something instead of listening to music for a bit. The music can sometimes feel like noise if I'm not in the right mood, and I'm forcing myself to write. That was a dumb idea, but watching something is too distracting. I'll just listen to fantasy music. I haven't written anything in so long, because I was pretty depressed after getting kicked out of the friend group I had for over 2 years. It's a long story that I don't want to overthink about right now. I'll just say that it sent me back into my old ways of being a depressed, lethargic shut-in who hardly gets any exercise or sun. I tried therapy and I gave up on that. It's another long story I might get into later. It's well after midnight and I'm pretty tired, so I guess I'll stop here. I know I haven't written much yet, but I started pretty late. Besides, I want to try to improve my sleeping habits. I would like to wake up before noon instead of well after for once. It's so hard to get good sleep when you're depressed. My parents and aunts finally stopped fighting over the inheritance from my grandparents and settled on who gets what recently. It took years for everything to be settled in court finally. According to my parents, my aunt did some stuff to give herself control over my grandparents' finances shortly before they died. I don't know, and I don't know if I care. I love my grandparents, but I don't like sticking my nose in or thinking about my family's drama. It's nice to have some extra money. My grandfather left me a few things. They just arrived in the mail today. Most of it is computer stuff. I got my love of tech from my grandpa. He taught me how to use them when I was really little. I remember visiting my grandparents and playing Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network games on his computer as a kid. It was a while before I had a computer at home, and even longer before we had internet faster than dial-up. As nice as the computer stuff is, it's not the most exciting thing my grandfather left me. I also got this old projector. It doesn't have any branding or labels on it, but it looks really nice and in good condition. Maybe my grandpa made it himself. His tech interests and knowledge were always far beyond mine. I was only ever interested in PCs, and he liked to fix anything and everything. Still, I wonder why he left me a projector. I was never really interested in this kind of stuff. One summer, my friends and I wanted to make a movie, and that's maybe why. But I was always way more interested in writing and making video games. Because of that, my tech interests and knowledge have always been mainly focused on the software side. This projector looks like it's from another era. The design is elegant yet mysterious, with intricate engravings along its metal casing that seem to tell their own story. I can't shake the feeling that there's something more to this projector, something beyond its physical appearance. Perhaps there's a reason my grandfather left it specifically to me, a reason that goes beyond nostalgia or a passing interest in filmmaking. I don't know why I didn't notice before, but it's bizarrely cold, almost like dry ice. I'm going to try it out in my large walk-in closet. The walls in there are bright white and plenty large. Plus, it's more than dark enough for the projections to show up clearly. Also, the bulb outlet has a power socket. I'm continuing this on my phone in my closet. I locked my bedroom door so my parents don't bother me while I watch this. I'm shocked this old projector still works perfectly. It emits an eerie, whirring hum as it powers on. Luckily, it came with a large film reel already loaded. I'm not surprised this thing is so slow. I guess this projector hasn't been tested in a while because it's kicking up a lot of dust. The hum of the projector is growing a little louder, filling this small space with a strange, low mechanical rhythm. The light from the projector is flickering to life on the wall in front of me, revealing a black and white scene reminiscent of early silent films. The image is blurry, grainy, foggy, and distorted as if it's been warped by time itself. It's hard to discern what exactly is being shown. Shapes and shadows dance across the surface, forming abstract patterns that seem to shift and morph with each passing moment. The scene is slowly beginning to coalesce into a semblance of coherence, like memories emerging from a fog. The images are muted and washed out as if drained of life. The setting appears to be abandoned, and it's an empty, featureless desert. A barren expanse is stretching out before me, devoid of any signs of habitation or vegetation. The sky above is a dull, featureless gray, casting a pall of gloom over the scene. Despite the lack of any discernible movement, I can't shake the feeling of being watched. It's as if unseen eyes are peering out from the darkness, observing my every move with a sense of malevolent curiosity. As I continue to watch, the scene on the wall begins to undulate subtly, like the surface of a still pond disturbed by a single drop. The barren desert landscape starts to darken at the edges, the shadows deepening and growing as if the night is rushing in at an unnatural pace. The horizon line is beginning to appear cracked and uneven, and separate the barren plains from a sky choked with churning, unnatural fog. An inky blackness is bleeding down from the clouds, slowly but steadily consuming the empty landscape. The whole scene is flooding with a strange, viscous substance. It's as if the very essence of the film is seeping through the projector, defying the laws of reality. The thick, murky liquid is creeping slowly across the landscape, swallowing everything in its path. It moves with an eerie deliberateness, oozing into every crevice and corner, consuming the world before my eyes. The viscous darkness now pools in the center of the barren vista, swirling and churning as if alive. From this inky well, a grotesque and misshapen head is slowly rising from the ground. Its features are vague and indistinct, like a half-remembered nightmare. It seems impossibly large, and its silhouette dwarfs the horizon. Hollow eyes stare out of it into the abyss, devoid of any emotion or life. It has a single, elongated nostril that hangs flaccid. The head makes no sound as its gaping maw yawns open, revealing row upon row of jagged teeth. All the liquid is somehow draining out of its mouth and drying most of the land. A shape is emerging from the depths of the churning, black ocean, or perhaps it's a boat. The distinction is blurred in the murky depths of the film. It's a silhouette shrouded in darkness, and its contours are barely discernible against the inky blackness of the water. It's slowly inching its way towards the shore. As it draws closer, details start to emerge from the gloom. Alone, skeletal rowboat bobs precariously in the churning waves. Suddenly, a long, spindly arm reaches out from the water, grasping the edge of the boat. The figure is pulling itself up onto the rocking ship, and each movement is deliberate and foreboding. It seems impossibly tall and thin, its limbs extremely long and twisted, like the branches of a gnarled tree reaching out to ensnare unwitting prey. Its head hangs at an unnatural angle, and its eyes, if they can be called eyes, gleam with an otherworldly light. They're piercing through the darkness with an intensity that sends shivers down my spine. The water around the ship is starting to bubble and froth. The figure is crying out a mournful sound that cuts through the rhythmic groan of the projector like a knife. It's somehow human and inhuman at the same time. For all my growing sense of unease, I'm unable to tear my gaze away from the unfolding spectacle. It's now standing on the boat, and it seems to be searching for something. Its pale, hollow orbs are scanning the barren horizon. It lets out another mournful cry, this one tinged with desperation. The camera just panned over to the forest. A monstrous, undulating creature is emerging from the depths of the forest. The grainy film struggles to capture its details. However, I can just barely make out its immense, barnacle-encrusted limbs and a hide that ripples like a vast sea. It's a creature so large it defies comprehension, dwarfing the mountains in the distance and casting an oppressive shadow that seems to stretch for miles. It moves with an unnatural grace, and its form is shifting and undulating like a specter summoned from the darkest depths of the human psyche. Its body is a patchwork of mismatched limbs and grotesque appendages, each one moving in perfect synchrony with the others. As it draws nearer, I can make out the details of its, well, what I guess is its face. Its eyes are empty voids, sucking in the light around them like black holes in the fabric of reality. Its mouth stretches impossibly wide, revealing row upon row of jagged teeth that glint malevolently in the dim light. The camera shifted focus again, and it settled on the most disturbing sight yet. In the center stands a colossal tree, unlike anything on Earth. It stretches endlessly upwards, disappearing into the swirling gray above. The sheer size of it is overwhelming, dwarfing the mountains on the horizon and casting a sickly green pall over the landscape. But it's not just the size that's chilling. The tree's roots are sprawling like the tentacles of some ancient leviathan. Its trunk is impossibly bulbous, its surface mottled and wrinkled like ancient, sun-baked flesh. The bark is gnarled and weeping sap that glows faintly, pulsating with a rhythm that mimics a heartbeat. Its branches are thick and sinuous and writhe and twist like enormous, petrified serpents. They seem to pulse with a slow, rhythmic life, their surfaces glistening with a sickly luminescence that seems to emanate from within the bark itself. Nestled amongst the branches, colossal, fleshy fruit dangle precariously, their surfaces pulsating with a rhythmic, almost hypnotic glow. They resemble giant, misshapen eyes, staring down at the desolate plain below with a cold, unblinking gaze. But the most unsettling aspect is the single, immense eye embedded deep within the trunk itself. It's a pulsating orb of raw, chaotic energy, the iris a swirling vortex of shifting colors. It stares out from the tree with a chilling intelligence. I can't help but feel it looking directly at me, judging, scrutinizing. This tree, this grotesque parody of nature, feels ancient beyond imagining, powerful beyond comprehension. It is a monument to some dark, unknown force, and I have a feeling I've stumbled upon something I was never meant to see. This tree, this entity, is the epicenter of the film's universe, a godlike presence that exudes an aura of primordial power. It's as if the tree has always been there, watching, waiting, a silent observer to the passage of eons. The figure from the boat, now on land, approaches the tree with a slow, reverent gait. Its form is dwarfed by the sheer size of the tree, yet there is a connection, an unspoken understanding between them. The figure reaches out a hand, and the tree responds, a single massive limb lowering to touch the figure's outstretched fingers. The landscape is starting to warp and twist, contorting into bizarre and unnatural shapes. The once primarily empty expanse is now filled with strange, otherworldly structures. Now, I see an overgrown garden with gnarled trees reaching out like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. They're casting twisted shadows across the ground. Strange, barely discernible shapes are popping in and out of view. Grotesque humanoid forms with unsettling proportions are writhing and wriggling across the screen. Their movements are jagged and erratic, as if they are not entirely tethered to the laws of physics. Their faces are shrouded and obscured by masks of blank, dark expression. I can make out the silhouette of a looming structure, its jagged spires piercing the heavens. As the minutes pass, the imagery is becoming increasingly surreal and disorienting. Shapes morph and twist in impossible ways, defying logic and reason. In spite of the unsettling nature of the footage, there is a certain monotony to it. The abstract patterns have become hypnotic, and it's starting to make my eyelids feel heavy. Between that and the rhythmic whirring of the projector's mechanics, I just might fall asleep in my chair right here. What happened? Where am I? I don't feel like I was asleep for very long. This doesn't look anything like my closet. I just woke up and I'm in a little white room. There's nothing in here except me, a small desk, a chair, a notebook, and a pen. The scariest thing is there is no door or window. I don't know how I ended up here or why, but I'm guessing whoever put me in here wants me to write my thoughts in this notebook. Well, I'm less guessing and more hoping that writing this will make them happy and let me out. I don't know what else I can do right now, but I can't think of what to write, and I'm still exhausted. And the fact that everything in this room is the same shade of white is strangely maddening, especially with the only light source here being one overbearing, almost blinding, bright white fluorescent light. I think I'll just try to take a nap. Maybe this is just a nightmare, and I'll wake up in my room. Fuck, damn it, I'm still stuck in here. And I think that the light is getting worse. It's almost impossible to see anything. It's almost like the light is washing away all the shadows and contrasting light. It's very disorienting. It's like being lost in a blank, white, empty void. I tried breaking through the walls. I even tried hitting them with the chair, but it didn't do any good, and I just wore myself out. I have to find some way out. That was weird. I had to rewrite that last sentence because I accidentally wrote it on the desk. At least, I think I did. Wait, where's the desk? I can't tell where the desk is. I keep trying to feel around for it in the all-consuming light, but it's almost like it just keeps shifting virtually as though it was liquid. Yet it feels rock solid and bone dry. It's a very confusing feeling I've never experienced before. I've had trouble feeling around for things in the dark before, but nothing has ever run from me like this. Damn, this is frustrating. What the hell? I slammed my fist down on the desk, and for a moment, I could tell where it was. However, as soon as I moved my hands, it shifted again. I can hardly believe it, but I think concentration makes it stay. Okay, this has to be a dream because it's working. I don't know if I'm awake. I feel very awake, but I don't care. I just want out. I have an idea. Wow, that worked. I drew a circle on the wall and forced my hand through. So I guess if I draw a door, maybe I can use it to escape. It's worth a shot. It was all I could do to scratch a crude rectangle across the wall, but I managed to make it through. I thought, but where am I now? I can't see anything. It's just pure bright white everywhere. Why can't I stand up? Am I falling? I think I am. How did it take me so long to notice that I was falling? It's like I wasn't falling before I saw or guessed it, but I didn't even feel like I was floating. I didn't feel like anything, like I was barely even existing. I've been falling for a while. What's going to happen? Am I stuck falling forever, or am I going to land? I don't know which I'm more afraid of. I've had way more than my fair share of suicidal thoughts, and I've even attempted it a couple of times. But I'm a coward who's terrified of death. I don't want my life to end now, especially not like this, and not here all alone. I'm so sorry. What? Am I okay? Am I alive? Where am I? The floor is so soft and cold. It's almost like it's not even there, but I feel like I'm on solid ground. That is solid enough. Anyway, this room is just as blindingly white as the last one. Well, at least this one is a lot bigger and has several doors. I might find an exit around here. This place is like an office building, except it's far more cold, sterile, and pure white. Every step I take here seems to be getting me more lost. How long have I been searching for an exit? This place is almost like an empty dream. I tried calling out for help, but I couldn't. No matter how hard I yell, I can't hear myself. I don't think there's anything wrong with me. I tried clapping, kicking the wall, and stomping the ground, but I heard nothing but a cold void of silence. This place is like a box that's hostile to any sign of life. It's oppressively sterile and trim as much as it is hopelessly endless. I don't even have any breath in here. How long have I been trapped here, searching for an exit in this stark white maze? I can't remember if I checked 300 rooms or just 3. I think this place is doing something to my brain. I can feel my mind slowly fading and getting fuzzy. I'm starting to struggle to think and concentrate. What's going on? Where am I? This place seems to be making me numb inside and out. I can feel my mind draining. What's wrong with me? Why can't I think? Why is my mind so blank now? Where was I? I lost my train of thought. I need to concentrate. I just need to find the exit. Every wasted moment that passes without anything accomplished burns. Time just seems to pass faster and faster and pull me closer and closer to death. The blank emptiness is strangling and suffocating my mind more and more. I'm lost in a self-perpetuating cycle because the longer I'm trapped, the more I can feel myself being crippled by this place. And the weaker I get, the faster this place breaks me. I'm just getting so tired now, I don't know how much longer I can push on or even move. And the scariest part is everything I don't know. I don't know why I'm here or how I get out. I don't know what will happen when this place drains me and I inevitably collapse. As tired as I am and as soft as the floor is, I wish I could just take a nap, but I can't, and I need to leave as soon as possible. I'm too afraid of what could happen if I stop moving. So, no matter how much every waking moment burns, I need to keep moving. I don't think I'd be capable of sleeping anyway. My mind isn't able to relax enough for that, and it's not even close. I just need to give up on the thought of peace or relaxation until I get the fuck out of here. I just need to concentrate on finding the exit. If I just hurry up and move faster, I can get out of here before it's too late. I can feel my body slowly starting to freeze up. I have to fight against my mind and body a little more with every step. The more I fight, the more it hurts, but I can't give up. I need to get out. I just need to focus hard. Harder than I ever have. If I just push on with every bit of strength I have left, I know I can get out of here. It really hurts, but I have to, and I just need to use the pain to drive me, to fuel the fire in my belly. Yes, that's it. I can feel myself moving faster and more easily. The harder I focus, the less I hurt. It's like ice is melting off me. I think I see a door in the distance that doesn't look like every other damn door in here. It doesn't look like an exit, and it barely looks any different. But it must be the exit, and it's the only door that doesn't seem exactly like the rest. I can't think why else it would seem as unique as it does. Damn it, what's wrong with that door? What's wrong with me? I can hardly describe it. I want to open it, and I have to open it. It's my only hope of escaping this nightmare. Yet, something is holding me back. I don't know why, but I'm terrified of this door. The closer I get, the more I freeze up from fear and struggle to even think about opening it. When I get close enough almost to touch the handle, I freeze like a statue. No, I'm so close. I can't be stuck here like this now. I have no idea how long I've been just standing here staring at that door. But I know I need to get out of here now. I also know that if anything is going to help me escape, it's probably that door. I mean, it's at least different. It's the only thing that is. I just need to relax and open that door. I know what I have to do, and I know I need to do it now. Yet I can't do it, no matter how simple it is. I just can't make my body do it. I don't even have a clue why I'm afraid. I have a few vague and unlikely guesses. It could be fear of the unknown or something like that, but that has never been the case for me. I've always loved to explore. Well, at least I was. I have been a hermit for the past handful of years, but that's not due to fear. Besides, I have no idea why or how I could have become afraid of the unknown or anything like that. At least, I am not this afraid or even close to it. Maybe part of me somehow knows what's on the other side of that door, but I don't see how that could be possible. I'm just thinking about and dwelling on this too much. It's a simple task, and I just need to rip it off like a band-aid. That's my problem. I think about stuff like this too much. I just have to calm the fuck down. I just need to stop being such a goddamn coward. But why am I such a loser coward? No. That's just it. I need to stop getting stuck in an endless loop of thinking about it. I just need to charge at the door and do it before I even realize what's happening. This is ridiculous and dumb, and I'm just going to do it already. All this thinking is going to trap me here forever. Okay, now or never. Here it goes. Well, I made it through. Thank fuck that worked. I had to almost black out and just mindlessly ram myself through, but I did it. But I'm not so sure this is the way out anymore. There's no way in hell I'm going back though. This place is pretty different from the rest of this labyrinth. I guess that's a good thing. I don't know, and I don't feel so much like I'm being drained or like I'm dying. But this place is a lot more foreboding, and it's darker, grayer, and duller. I'm sure why this place feels so much more unsettling to me than the previous section. I've always loved the dark. It usually makes me feel calm and confident. Wait, what's that in the corner? It's just a shadow, but it almost looks like it has a thin, spindly hand coming out of it. It is pretty hard to see here. It's probably just a trick of the light or something. I guess I'll just try to ignore it and keep looking for the exit. The more I explore this place, the more uneasy I feel. I feel like this place is messing with my head, but not as harshly as the white section. At least not yet. I'm starting to feel like I'm being hunted. Almost everywhere I look, there are strange shadows. I know I need to look around everywhere and behind every door if I want to find the exit, but it's so difficult here. Well, I just can't think of anything better, to be honest. But thinking about checking what's behind any of these doors makes me nervous. I'm struggling to keep myself from running back to the first area despite how miserable that was. At least I don't feel my mind fading or my body aching anymore. Now I can think. It's just somewhat difficult to think. It's weird because it doesn't feel like a headache. Thinking just makes me feel tired and a bit disoriented, like getting the wind knocked out of me. Is something here with me? I feel like every corner and intersection of this place is watching me. I should just stay focused on getting out of here fast. If there is something in here, escaping is probably the only thing I can do about it, so I had better get to it. So this is it, the first door. Am I outside? I think I made it out. I must have. I'm at the local park. I don't know what happened to the door I came out of, but I don't care. I'm just happy to be out of there finally. I've never felt this happy, not since I was a kid anyway. After all that, I need to sit and relax for just a moment. That bench looks good. I remember playing with other kids in this park when I was tiny, about 3 or probably 4. Man, those were some of the happiest memories I've ever made. It's such a lovely night, and the full moon is beautiful. I forgot how nice this park is, but it doesn't seem to have changed a bit since I was a kid. My eyes are getting so heavy, and I better get going soon before I fall asleep. What happened? I must have nodded off, and I guess I was even more tired than I realized. Wait! Did the bench grow while I was asleep? Fuck, that wasn't the exit, was it? I'm still stuck in that hell, aren't I? Assuming I'm right, how the fuck do I get out of this nightmare? What's that? Is this a frisbee? It looks exactly like one of the frisbees my friends and I would throw around when we were little. It has the same cheap, plasticky, almost rubbery look and the same bright, vibrant, warm, candy-like color. Hey, buddy, wanna play some frisbee? It's been a really long time, but I remember that voice. Yep, that's Caleb and the rest of my friends from when I was a toddler. Just as I remember them smiling brightly with pure joy in their eyes. I can hardly believe it. Is this some kind of dream? We had so much fun, and we raced all over the place on our tricycles. We played a lot of games like catch, tag, hide and seek. We even saw and collected fireflies in jars. We had the time of our lives for what felt like several hours, but it must have been well over a day because I remember 2 nights passing. I know I should be trying to find my way home, but I don't want to think about that right now. Sophie just told me about a cool place my friends want to explore with me. It sounds so cool, and it's like some sort of empty factory with a bunch of bizarre machines. I can't resist the offer. It's been so long since I've been on an adventure like that, especially with friends. It looks like they're ready, and it's time to get going. My life has felt so empty and frozen for so long, and I need this. My friends and I did a lot of exploring, kind of like this when I was a kid. I'm excited and curious to find out why there's a strange factory in the forest just beyond the park. On the way, my friends and I couldn't help but get distracted playing around and exploring in the forest. We swung on and played on the trees like a jungle gym for hours. We almost forgot about the factory. It really felt like being a little kid again. The forest was filled with my friends' echoing laughter and playful banter. It was as if we were frozen in time, reliving those cherished childhood memories. The sun cast a warm, golden hue through the leaves, and the chirping of birds provided the soundtrack to our adventure. As we ventured deeper into the woods, I couldn't help but notice how the trees seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky, their branches forming a dense canopy above us. The air was thick with the scent of earth and leaves, and the ground was covered in a soft carpet of moss that cushioned our every step. Caleb, the ringleader of our little group, led the way with his boundless energy and infectious enthusiasm. He was always the one with the wildest ideas and the biggest dreams, and it seemed like nothing had changed. He was the first to spot the strange factory in the distance. It's weird, and I thought this place was a manifestation of my memories from when I was a kid, but I don't remember exploring a forest when I was this young or with this group of friends. It was so long ago that I struggle a bit to remember all of it clearly, but I doubt I would forget a factory in a forest connected to the park. When I think of it, I don't remember a forest being connected to the park, at least not this park anyway. There's the factory. It looks strangely pristine and welcoming, except it's covered in a soft, glowing mist. Just looking at it sends a shiver down my spine, but my friends seem unfazed by it. At this point, I almost want to turn around and go back to the park, but I can't resist exploring this place. I have to know what's inside, especially with that oddly faint but beautiful light emanating from it. Besides, as I look back at the forest, I realize it's not much better, and I don't remember the way back anyway. Well, I'd better try to catch up with my friends. I don't want to be even more lost. This place isn't so scary. The more we explore it, the more we realize how interesting and even fun it is. This place is starting to seem a bit familiar. I think I have been to a place like this before. I think it was some sort of field trip. I remember being fascinated by the lights, sounds, big freezers, and conveyor belts. It just seemed so otherworldly to me at the time. I was so young, and now my memory is so hazy that it almost feels like a dream. The few memories I have from being this young have almost completely faded. God! That's depressing because they're some of the few truly happy memories I have. I can't help but smile at the sight of my friends having so much fun. Their laughter and joy are just so infectious. The factory is even more wonderful than I expected. There are all kinds of machines and gadgets that I don't recognize, but they look cool and futuristic. Some of them are still working, making weird noises and flashing lights. This place is starting to seem like a wonderland, full of surprises and discoveries. Some machines can do amazing things, like create music and paint pictures. My friends and I are having the time of our lives, exploring every inch of the factory. It's so awesome to press buttons, pull levers, and watch in awe as the machines come to life, creating a symphony of sounds and lights. We pretended to be workers, inventors, explorers, and rebels. We even sang and danced along with the machines. We had so much fun that we lost track of time and forgot about everything else. However, as the hours pass, a subtle unease creeps deeper into the corners of my mind. It's not about the place itself, but rather the idea that this euphoric world could be fleeting and slip away at any moment. This growing sense of dread gnaws at me, but I'm trying to bury it beneath the joy of being with my friends. As the night progresses, the world around us shifts, becoming more twisted and surreal. Everything around me starts to fade away, like a painting being washed away by water. Colors blur, blend, and become duller, and the shapes become hazier. The once vibrant factory has begun to lose its luster. The glowing mist is receding, revealing the cold reality that was hidden beneath. The lights flicker and dim, casting long shadows that taunt me. The machinery slows to a grinding halt. The symphony of sounds reduced to an eerie silence. My friends' laughter is becoming distant, their voices muffled, and their once vibrant presence fades. Maybe this is just happening here. If we return to the park, everything will be better. As I rush through the factory, I notice it changing further. The machines that once danced with us now seem to groan with exhaustion as they break down and rust before my eyes. The walls are cracked and dirty, and the floor is littered with dust and debris. It's as if this place has been abandoned for years, maybe decades. The factory is crumbling around me, its wonders fading into the void. The entrance seems to be locked or jammed. A sense of urgency creeps in, so I pull harder and harder with all my might. No matter how hard I try and how desperately I want to get back to the park, I can't force the entrance to open. My body is slumping to the floor as my mind gives way to the feeling of defeat and hopelessness. Suddenly, panic surges through me, and tears well up in my eyes as the illusion crumbles before me. Memories cascade like waterfalls. I realize that this dreamlike world, this newfound joy, is slipping away. No! This factory isn't a manifestation of my memories, but a distortion of them. A cruel illusion that lured me in and then betrayed me. This realization hits me like a ton of bricks, and a heavy ache settles in my chest. Then, as if on cue, my friends surround me. Their faces a mix of sorrow and support, as if they understand the depth of what's happening. One by one, they begin to disappear. Their forms blur and dissolve into vapor like ghosts. My hands pass through my friends like they're clouds as I desperately try to reach out and hold on to this fleeting happiness. It's as if the veil of illusion has been lifted. A dark, thick smog is creeping in, filling the air with a faint smell of smoke and ash. I'm left in a cold, desolate place, the remnants of my joyful memories slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. As I sit here in the cold, lonely darkness, I can see and feel myself rapidly aging back to adulthood. I can see a dull light shining several feet in front of me. I can see it's a hallway light shining through the open door into the room I've been in this whole goddamn time. I'm back where I started. I was never outside. I've been trapped within this cruel labyrinth all along. Well, I have to keep going. As much as I don't want to go through something like that again, I have to try more doors unless I want to stay trapped in this hell. So, I'll muster up what strength I have left, get up, and force myself to push on forward. The dark, seemingly endless hallway stretches before me as I search for the next door. I remember this area having fewer doors than the first area, but I remember it being more than this. I wasn't expecting to have to search for another door to try. I hope I can find another door to try. There has to be another door, right? The shadows that once seemed creepy but harmless now feel like ominous entities. The last time I was here I thought, or maybe was hoping, that I was just paranoid. But now I'm starting to think something is in here, stalking me. Before their shapes were ill-defined, they looked like hands, sure, but only vaguely. They could have been almost anything, some sort of wires for all I know. I swear they're slowly taking more definite shapes the longer I'm here. Also, I think they might be starting to move. I better pick up the pace. I don't want to be here long. Ha! It's almost funny. I mean, there's one silver lining. At least this creepy maze is keeping me motivated to find an exit quickly. Wow! I must be getting tired. I think I'm starting to get pretty punchy. I'm almost too exhausted to be scared, even here. Finally, another door. Hopefully, this is the exit. Where am I now? It looks like some sort of cemetery in the middle of a forest. If I didn't know any better, I think I was outside. So, is that the big fucked up gag of this place? Am I just supposed to keep thinking? Maybe I have made it out this time over and over again until I lose my mind? Well, I'm not going to make that assumption again. Not after last time. At least not quickly. What was that? Hello? Is somebody there? I know I heard something, and I'm pretty sure I saw them in the distance. It was so hard to tell. I just saw a tall, dark, thin silhouette in the distance for a second. There it is again, and it's getting closer. I get the feeling I'm not safe here. I should get out of here quickly. I've been running for what feels like hours. There's no way I can keep this up. I'm going to pass out. I really must be starting to lose my mind because that pile of leaves is starting to look so comfy and inviting. It does look to be in a pretty tucked away and hidden place. I haven't heard or seen anything in a little bit, and I could have lost them. This forest is vast and dense. Maybe if I'm cautious and quiet. I can't believe I'm even considering it, and there's no way it's safe. But F-U-C-K, I can hardly stand, and my eyes are so heavy. I can hardly think. I might collapse out in the open soon if I don't get some rest. It's just a pile of leaves, but the relief of finding a temporary refuge is washing over me. Exhaustion is consuming every ounce of my energy, and it's a struggle to catch my breath as it comes in ragged gasps. My body aches, and my heart races, not just from the frantic running, but from the fear that still courses through me. The silence is eerie, almost suffocating. Is it possible that I've managed to escape whatever was chasing me? Or is this just another illusion, a cruel trick of this labyrinth? I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. The ground beneath me feels oddly soft, and surprisingly, the leaves cradle me in a cocoon of comfort. It's strange how desperation can make even the most unlikely places seem inviting. As dangerous as it is, I need to close my eyes for just a moment to rest and regain my strength. As the seconds pass, the inviting warmth of sleep begins to pull me in. I can hardly fight against it to keep my eyes open and my mind alert. It's all I can do to remain in a state of semi-consciousness between wakefulness and sleep. The woman of my dreams. For the past few weeks, I've been seeing a woman in my dreams. She is beautiful and lovely in every way. I've always been a lonely man, never having much luck with women, and I've always been antisocial, never going out much. At first, when I began dreaming of her, it felt like magic. Like my dreams were another world where I finally had someone. I almost preferred sleep over the real world. Every night, she would appear. We would meet in different places. Sometimes a quiet meadow under the stars, other times in a small, cozy room that felt like home, even though I'd never seen it before. She never spoke, but she didn't need to. Her presence was enough. It was like she knew me, understood me in a way no one ever had. The way she looked at me with those deep, mesmerizing eyes made me feel like I mattered, like I wasn't alone anymore. I started going to bed earlier, eager to see her again, to escape into that perfect world where she waited for me. It was intoxicating, the way she made me feel wanted. It wasn't long before I found myself longing for sleep more than the waking hours. The loneliness that had haunted me for so long started to fade, replaced by the comfort of her presence in my dreams. But then, things began to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. A few nights ago, something changed. Something felt off about the woman, though I couldn't place exactly what it was. She looked the same, still as beautiful, still as perfect, but her silence became cold. Her gaze, the one that once made me feel seen and understood, now felt different. Sinister, somehow. It wasn't obvious at first. Anyone else might have seen her expression as friendly, even inviting, but there was something lurking behind her eyes. My gut told me there was more to her, something dark, something evil. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just overthinking it. After all, it was just a dream, right? But that feeling, that creeping sense of dread, it wouldn't go away. It clung to me, even after I woke up, like a shadow following me through the day. It was subtle, almost like a whisper, but I could feel it growing. Whatever she was, whatever she had become, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer safe with her. For the first time in weeks, as I lay down to sleep, I hoped I wouldn't dream of her. That sense of anticipation I once had was gone, replaced by a quiet dread. But as sleep came, I was back with the woman. This time, we were in a vast garden, flowers blooming everywhere, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air. She beckoned me to follow her, and for a moment, I had forgotten my fears. But as I walked behind her, that same creeping sense of dread began to return. Something wasn't right about her anymore. Her smile was too wide, her stare too piercing, like some kind of predator that had its prey in sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As we wandered through the garden, the scenery around us began to shift. The vibrant flowers wilted, the sky darkened, and the once tranquil air became heavy, oppressive. My heart raced as I realized that this wasn't just a dream. It was something far more dangerous. My suspicions were confirmed when I tried to wake myself. Have you ever had one of those nightmares where you know you're dreaming but can't wake up? It was exactly like that. Panic set in. I struggled to pull myself out of the dream, but the more I tried, the more I felt her eyes on me, sharp and knowing. She seemed to sense what I was doing. Her movements quickened, and she came toward me, her smile never fading, but I could feel a dark intensity behind it. She wanted to keep me there, trapped with her. I woke up just before she could reach me, my heart pounding in my chest. That smile of hers never left her face, but beneath it, I sensed a frustration, a quiet fury that chilled me to the bone. After that last dream, I knew I couldn't let myself fall asleep again. I stayed awake the entire next day, forcing myself to keep going, no matter how tired I felt. I drank more coffee than I ever had in my life, paced around my apartment, and tried to distract myself with anything I could think of, anything to avoid seeing her again. Every time I closed my eyes, even for a second, I could feel her presence waiting for me. But no one can fight sleep forever. Eventually, the exhaustion caught up with me. I passed out while watching TV, unable to fight it any longer. As soon as I drifted off, I was back in that strange world, and she was there, waiting for me. But this time, something about her was different, worse. Her form was distorted now, though still somehow beautiful. but in a way that made my skin crawl. It was like staring at something that shouldn't exist, something both human and not. Her movements were too fluid, her limbs too long, her smile stretched too wide. That familiar sense of dread returned, stronger than ever before. Every instinct I had screamed for me to run, to get away from her, but I couldn't move. My legs were frozen, my body paralyzed with fear as she drew closer. Her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I tried to wake up again, but this time, it wasn't working. No matter how hard I struggled, I couldn't pull myself out of the dream. The woman was getting closer, her eyes fixed on me with that same cold hunger. I felt my body tremble, with fear, but I couldn't move. I was trapped, just like before. Then, before I could react, she was there, her arms wrapped around me, pulling me into a tight embrace. At first, I didn't know what to do. It was like everything inside me froze. Her body pressed against mine, but instead of warmth, I felt only cold. A deep, lifeless chill that seeped into my bones. Her grip tightened, and I could feel the strength behind it. Far more than any human should have. It was crushing, squeezing the air out of my lungs. I tried to push her away, but I was powerless. The harder she squeezed, the more I struggled to breathe. My chest burned, and panic filled me as I realized I couldn't get free. I gasped for air, but nothing came. I woke up on my couch, gasping for air. My lungs felt like they were on fire, and my chest ached from the pressure. It took me a few seconds to realize where I was, still dazed and half lost in the nightmare. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Maybe it was sleep apnea, I thought. Maybe. That's why I couldn't breathe in the dream. My body must have struggled for air, and my mind reflected it. It made sense, or at least it was the only explanation that didn't make me feel like I was losing it. I told myself it was all just a coincidence. But later in the day, something else happened. As I was getting dressed, I felt a stinging on my back. When I went to check it out in the mirror, I saw it. Scratch marks. Thin, red lines running down my back, like someone had clawed at me. I was confused, staring at them in disbelief. Maybe it was the couch, I thought. Maybe I shifted in my sleep, and something on the fabric scraped me. Still, I couldn't shake the idea that somehow she did this. It sounded insane, I knew that. But every time I looked at those marks, I felt a cold, creeping fear in the back of my mind. I knew I couldn't go back to sleep. Not after that. I had to figure out how to stop dreaming of her. But how? How do you control something as unpredictable as your dreams? I felt helpless, but I couldn't. Just sit back and wait for her to come back. So I did the only thing I could think of. I researched. I spent hours scouring forums, reading articles, and watching videos about dream control. That's when I learned about lucid dreaming. Being aware that you're dreaming while it's happening. It sounded impossible, like something out of a movie, but some people swore by it. They claimed that, with enough practice, you could shape your dreams, even banish nightmares. It was my only hope. If I could become aware that I was dreaming, maybe I could stop her. Maybe I could finally escape. I looked up methods for practicing lucid dreaming and decided to give it a try. I spent hours meditating, focusing on her, picturing her face, and telling myself over and over that I would banish her from my dreams. I needed to be in control. Slowly, exhaustion overtook me, and I drifted off to sleep. There she was again, standing in the same haunting silence, beckoning me to come closer. But this time, I knew I couldn't. I planted my feet, forcing myself to stay where I was. I had to control my dreams. I screamed at her, telling her to go away. She stood still, staring at me, as if contemplating my defiance. Her smile, the one that had always been present, slowly began to fade, replaced by something far more chilling, an angered frown. Without a word, she turned away and walked into the shadows. For a moment, I thought I'd won. She wasn't there anymore. I continued to dream, but as the minutes passed, I started to lose control. The awareness that I was dreaming began to slip away, and I forgot I was even asleep. That's when it happened. I was walking through a bright, bustling city, full of people. Everything felt warm and peaceful. But as I turned a corner, I bumped into her. She was different this time, her form even more twisted and sinister. Her long arms were tipped with sharp claws, and her once perfect face was distorted into something far more terrifying. She reached out for me, and I tried to run, but it was too late. Her claws dug into my skin, slashing across my face. The burning pain was unbearable, and as the world around me faded to darkness, I heard her scream, a sound that wasn't human, an unnatural, monstrous wail that echoed in my ears. Then I woke up, my heart pounding, the pain from her claws still fresh in my mind. I went straight to the bathroom, desperate to shake off the remnants of the nightmare. But when I looked in the mirror, I froze. There on my face were the claw marks, thin, jagged lines that trailed across my cheek. My heart sank at the sight. This wasn't just a dream anymore. Somehow, she had reached through my nightmares and left a mark on me in the real world. I couldn't deny it any longer. She meant to hurt me, and she could. It seemed impossible. How could something from a dream do this? But the scratches were there, raw and real, staring back at me in the reflection. My mind raced with questions, but there were no answers. All I knew was that if I went back to sleep, she'd come for me again. I stayed awake for 3 days straight after that, pushing my body to its limits. I tried everything: coffee, loud TV, pacing the floor, anything to keep my eyes open. But no one can outrun exhaustion forever. I could feel it creeping in, weighing down my limbs, clouding my thoughts. I knew it wouldn't be long until I passed out, no matter how much I tried to fight it. And when that happened, I knew she'd be waiting. I wanted so badly to stay awake. Every fiber of my being dreaded the thought of what else might happen to me if I slept. But no matter how much I fought it, exhaustion finally won. I passed out. This time, the moment I saw her, I didn't hesitate. I ran. She gave chase, her voice echoing in the distance. But it wasn't a scream this time. It was worse. It was a garbled mess of sounds, like she was trying to talk to me but couldn't make out the words. It was twisted, unnatural, and filled with something far more terrifying than just anger. I kept running, my legs burning, my lungs aching, but she was faster. She caught up to me. Her hands gripped me, cold and unrelenting, and she turned me to face her. I couldn't believe what I saw. The woman I had once thought so beautiful now looked monstrous. Her smile stretched wide, filled with jagged teeth, and her once perfect eyes were now sunken and dark, as if hollowed out by something evil. Then she kissed me. It wasn't like anything I had ever felt. It was as if she was sucking the life out of me, draining everything I had. I could feel my energy slipping away, my body weakening, as her lips pressed against mine. It felt like dying. And then, just as the darkness started to consume me, I woke up, my heart pounding, my chest heaving as I gasped for air. I lay in bed for a while, tears welling in my eyes. How could my dreams turn against me so violently? How could that woman, once so sweet, so beautiful, become this nightmare? A monster that was hurting me. It didn't make any sense. The fear I felt was unbearable, and the line between reality and my dreams seemed to blur more with each passing night. Eventually, I got up to go to the bathroom, my body weak, trembling. After using the toilet, I splashed some cold water on my face, hoping it would ground me, bring me some sense of peace. The water felt serene, cool, and comforting. I clung to the sensation, relishing the simple relief of being awake, of being safe in the real world where she couldn't reach me. I let out a deep breath, relieved. But as I dried my face with a towel and looked up into the mirror, my heart stopped. There she was, Standing behind me in the dimly lit corridor of my hallway, her twisted form barely visible in the shadows,